Hey, everybody. Welcome to tonight's show. I want to thank you all so much for being here. Hold on for a minute. I got an issue. Okay. Sorry, guys. Um, Hold on. Okay. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for being here tonight. Um, uh, we have an awesome show tonight, but I can't. Oh, God, I got a problem, guys. Hold on. I don't know what's going on here. I'm gonna have to. I'll just clip this out. Hold on. Okay, here we go. So, tonight I have a fabulous show, and I'm so excited to have Drew Beeson and Ryan Burns on the show. Now, the thing is, before we, I'll bring them on and we'll talk about how this all came about because I posted something on on Facebook and I sure got it from them. So we're going to welcome our guests, Drew Beeson and Ryan Burns, to the show, and let's bring them on. Hey guys, thanks so much for being on the show.
Hey Norene, I don't see us yet on
Yeah, here we
screen.
are. Here we are. Can you see me?
I can see you.
Oh, can you see the show? We're on the show.
I'm watching on my phone
Oh,
too, and I don't
it's
see
30
us yet.
seconds. It's 30
Oh, it's
seconds
delayed now.
behind.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
now I'm
Yeah.
up and now I'm waiting for
Yeah.
Ryan. Okay,
Yeah, that's gonna go away. I thought I had
perfect.
cleared it out, but
Ah, it looks great. It looks great.
yeah.
Oh, there
I
we
know
go.
you have a new system. I know you have a new
Yeah.
system, so I'm like, but I
This
love
is
it. It's
new.
great. No, I like your layout. I love it. It is new. It's new. It's new for me because I thought you were going to do Skype, and I told Ryan a little earlier that it might be Skype, but then I remember you were going to send an email, so I didn't know you were using a new program. But it looks fantastic. I'm looking
Oh,
at it now.
oh, awesome. Thanks. All right, so listen, before we start the show, Drew, tell the viewers about yourself and how you're connected to this case.
Oh wow, I go way back with this case. Of course, a lot of people from this channel know me. Done a lot of shows on here. We've done a few DB Cooper shows on here as well as Zodiac. I've been into DB Cooper a long, long, long time. Probably going back to the Leonard Nimoy In Search Of, which I know brought a lot of people in. That was the first, I think, national TV show that covered the DB Cooper case, which of course is a notorious hijacking that happened in 1971, where a man jumped out of a plane with $200,000 and was never seen again. And Ryan can elaborate even better than I can on exactly how that played out. But Leonard Nimoy covered it on his show. Of course, that's Mr. Spock. And that was in 1979, I believe, when that show came out. And it came out before a young boy found about $5,800 of DB Cooper's money in a place called the Tina Bar along the Columbia River. So that's how far back that show went. And then famously, again, the show was covered on Unsolved Mysteries, of course, hosted by Robert Stack. And that was my all-time favorite show that got me into all the mysteries that I like, including Roswell was a big one. I got to meet the guy that was the head producer of that particular episode, Sam Lucchese. And when Unsolved Mystery covered DB Cooper, I was really hooked. I was like, I got to know more about this guy. So then I kind of went dormant for a while, and I was listening to Coast AM a lot. Of course, you talk about everything: UFOs, aliens, everything under the sun. And a guy came on that show by the name of Galen Cook, and he was an attorney from Seattle, Washington, who found a DB Cooper suspect named Wolfgang Gossett, who was a real interesting character. And I just immediately became transfixed back into what is called now the Cooper Vortex. And I think that's a term a guy named Mark Metzler actually came up with the term Cooper Vortex, which is getting literally sucked into this case. It's literally addictive. It's like an addiction. Like you want to find out who Cooper was. You want to find out how that money turned up on Tina Bar. It's like two mysteries in one: how the money wound up on Tina Bar in 1980, and of course, who DB Cooper was, the big mystery. So after listening to Galen Cook, it kind of reignited everything for me, and I kind of started learning about this gentleman, Wolfgang Gossett. I thought he did a great job presenting this gentleman as a great DB Cooper suspect, and then soon thereafter, a new suspect got introduced by the name of Robert Rackstraw that got a lot of media attention, kind of like Richard McCoy did lately. And they did a show on the History Channel called DB Cooper Case Closed. And it was like, I would remember watching that show and remembering thinking, hopefully they have solved this case, because I was really into it. I wasn't pushing a suspect. I did like Gossett at the time, but this was going to talk about a gentleman named Robert Rackstraw. developed by a TV producer named Stephen Colbert. And about 1 hour into the show, and we quickly started falling apart. They had the lead witness in the case, flight attendant named Tina Mucklow, looked at pictures of this suspect, and she ruled him out. And the two people on the show that were kind of backing Mr. Colbert kind of turned on him and said, "No, we don't think you've done enough here to prove that you have the right guy for Cooper." So that's kind of what reignited me back into the case. And I was searching a DB Cooper message board one day, and they were talking about a suspect named Ted B. Braden. And I picked up Ted Braden. It's kind of like adopted him after these other two gentlemen developed him a little bit. A guy named Snowman and another guy named Bruce Smith, who we call the mayor of Cooperville, that Ryan and I know very well. And we just got to see him in person at the annual DB Cooper convention that Ryan is now running with two other gentlemen. And I kind of took this suspect and kind of built upon him and wrote a book about him. Heard from Ryan about 4 years ago, and he wrote me a really nice email about how much he liked the book and the suspect. And that's kind of my story of how I got into DB Cooper. And as the listeners know, I also wrote about the Zodiac Killer in Yuba County 5, or probably my 3 top cases. So that's just my brief cliff notes into how I got into the DB Cooper case and my evolution in it so far.
And Ryan, what about you?
Well, basically the same thing as Drew. Just grew up as a giant nerd, liking In Search of and Unsolved Mysteries and all that. There was a show on Fox called like Sightings or something, that was like a paranormal show. Just the kind of stuff like that. And same thing, Unsolved Mysteries, I think. But really, I was in law school back in like 2007 or so in Mississippi, and Larry Carr was the FBI case agent at the time. Ever since the 80s, they've only ever had one agent assigned to this case. And at the time, it was a guy named Larry Carr. And Larry Carr came from the bank robbery division of the FBI. And when he took over the Cooper hijacking case, he said, I'm going to apply what we use in bank robberies to this Cooper case that's been dead basically for decades, which is to get all the evidence out there as much as possible. And that's what they do in bank robberies is with bank robberies, they will put out as much evidence as we saw that with the killer of the healthcare guy in New York City, right? They put out all this information immediately. Like somebody's going to know this guy, somebody's going to know something. That's what they do in bank robberies. Okay. And so he said, you know what? I'm going to go on TV and show off all this DB Cooper stuff. DB Cooper left his necktie on the plane, and nobody had ever seen that necktie until Larry Carr in 2007 did like a media blitz and was like, here's the necktie and here's the parachute that he cut up. And I just remember being in law school, and when you're in law school, at least I didn't pay attention too much sometimes. And you goof off in there and you're online. And I read an article from Larry on CNN or something and just started Googling it. And then I started lurking on a website called the Drop Zone, which is an online forum. And there were a bunch of mean bullies in there yelling at each other. And I said, okay, I'm not jumping in this water with these knuckleheads. And then in 2015, so years go by, I become a prosecutor, an assistant DA, then a DA. And then I'm no longer an assistant DA or DA. And I open my own practice, and just I have a business that kind of runs itself, and just actually got the nerve to jump in a little bit with those tough guys on the message boards, and just built from there. And really what's happened was when the FBI closed this case in 2016, they released they were sued actually by people during the previous 40 years of the case. They weren't releasing any case documents because under the Freedom of Information Act, you cannot. One of the exceptions for the Freedom of Information Act is active law enforcement investigations. That's their excuse for not releasing, case files on whatever. But once they closed this case, which they actually didn't, that was just a media stunt by the FBI. They were tired of getting people calling about their Uncle Joe and stuff, and it never turning up, and it never turning out to be the right thing. They're just being harassed. Like if you talk to Larry Carr, or I've talked to several of the agents who worked at the FBI office there in Seattle, the bosses hate the DB Cooper case. Like they just loathe it. with a passion of 1,000 demons. They just hate it. And so they're like, screw it. We're just going to tell everybody it's closed, that I guess this guy got away, but they didn't really close it. But anyway, when they did that, they opened themselves up to be FOIA'd. So a federal judge said, you guys have to release all 85,000 pages of investigative documents that you have. And they've been doing that ever since 2017. They've been releasing about 500 a month. At the start of the month on FBI.gov, there's a website, and here comes 500 new DB Cooper documents. And so as a lawyer, I love looking at case files and things, and I just got really into reading those case files. And that was really the first time that any of us saw like behind the curtain and saw what they really had, and saw what myths there were, and what, like, for example, like this whole thing about Cooper jumping in loafers that you just always grew up hearing about. Oh, he jumped in a suit and loafers in a freezing rainstorm. Well, it wasn't even freezing. It was 44 degrees on the ground, light rain showers, wasn't a storm. He wasn't wearing loafers. He was wearing ankle high little booties, sort of. He didn't jump in a wilderness. He jumped into a county of 150,000 people at the time, 10 miles from Portland even. So, I mean, like, our entire thought process about DB Cooper has changed significantly since we actually can see the real FBI files. And we can also see another thing too, is FBI love to tell the media for decades that Cooper died. Like, they're like, oh, he died. He jumped out and went splush and splashed in the river, or whatever. Well, we can look at their internal documents. They thought he lived. Okay. I mean, they all assumed he lived. And now, having talked to some of these agents who are retired, even the ones who were around back then, there's a few of them. I interviewed one of them on stage at Cooper conference 2 weeks ago. He's 85 years old, and he was one of the guys there that night at the airport. And he spent 2 years of his life looking for DB Cooper. And you ask him, did you guys think he lived? Of course. I mean, it's never even like, yeah, duh. It's like, we would have found something, where he jumped, he would have crashed through somebody's ceiling more so than if you watch Unsolved Mysteries or something. They love showing like these mountains and things, like he jumped into the mountains, and that's just not even remotely true. In fact, the area where Cooper jumped into, there was a skydiving center there in a place called Orchards, Washington. So if there's a skydiving center like within a few miles of where he jumped out, then clearly it's not the wilderness. So a lot of misnomers about this case that we can now clear up. And I just love this case because I love this case because I hate this case. We have a real
makes a lot of love-hate relationship.
It really is. Like, it is like, for your viewers who might know Star Trek, I've started calling it what's called the Kobayashi Maru. Is there's a the famous thing in Star Trek. There's like a test in the Starfleet Academy that only James T. Kirk beat because he cheated. It's basically it's an impossible problem. It's an impossible scenario. It's a no-win scenario, and this is almost like some FBI Kobayashi Maru. Like, this is an unsolvable case because there's so many contradictory things. You read these case files. Sometimes he's stupid. Sometimes he's smart. Sometimes he's James Bond. Sometimes he's flipping hamburgers. Cooper is it's a weird case.
Very weird.
All right. So how this all came about was because I was looking at YouTube, and I saw the title about DB Cooper, something about Richard McCoy, and I listened to it, and this Dan Gryder, is it Gryder? Saying it
Correct.
right? Gryder, an investigator, was a guest on CNN, and he claimed that he found DB Cooper's parachute in North Carolina in 2022. And he's proving that it's the identity for DB Cooper, and it's Richard Floyd McCoy. And he said he found in McCoy's mother's deep storage her prized possessions. She had the parachute, the canopy, his logbook, all tucked away, and it hadn't been seen in 53 years. And the children would not talk to Dan until the mother and the grandmother died. So I guess they both died now. And not only that, he said that the mother, Karen, was an accomplice in both hijackings. He said that most people don't know that there were two hijackings. Richard Floyd McCoy, D.B. Cooper the first, and then a second one 5 months later in April of 1972. He said that in that logbook, in McCoy's handwriting, it showed 39 previous military static line jumps accomplished by McCoy in the military. He served 2 terms of Vietnam. He was a helicopter pilot, a fixed wing pilot, and a military trained jumper. And in that logbook, he said it showed 8 practice jumps leading up to D.B. Cooper's jump. Before he did a practice jump prior to April of 1972. And now he says that all the FBI cares about is purely just the DNA. So tell us about this. And I want to know about that logbook. Do you guys know anything about that logbook that he said he has?
So what? I mean, I guess the thing is, so what? It's like, okay, how many other skydivers were jumping in the months between, before they, how many other skydivers were jumping before November 71 for the previous months? It's like, okay, well, if some guy in my neighborhood, if some guy in Louisiana, pulls off a bank heist and drives his getaway car away, well, I was driving a car in the months earlier too. Like, it doesn't matter. Just, there's lots of skydivers. Basically, okay, so we'll just, Drew and I will try to not get aggravated because basically
get aggravating.
Essentially, this is the most bogus story imaginable. I can't even. It is as preposterous as if somebody was literally wearing a gorilla suit and they said this is a Bigfoot footage. Like, I found Bigfoot and it's literally a guy with a zipper with the price tag from Hobby Lobby, sticking out of his. It's that bad. Like, it's that bad, but the media doesn't vet. They just want clicks these days. And I hate to sound like, oh, the media, but like it's a clickbait society. It's like, oh, instant, flashing lights, DB Cooper. Oh, what is it? I mean, they had this guy on CNN for an hour. He's literally pulling a hoax. Like, I mean, this is without question. Like, I mean, like, put a pistol to either of our heads and pull the trigger. Like, it is not real. And look, you talk to the FBI guys and Larry, I mean, there should be an article coming out tomorrow, I think, actually, or maybe the next day, where me and Larry Carr, the same people, well, I couldn't say that, but like there will be an article coming out that will get some national press, I think, with me and Larry Carr, who's one of the FBI agents who he recently retired. In fact, Dan Gryder in 2022, when he found this parachute, contacted Larry Carr, who was the case agent at the time, who was actually in the FBI still. He goes, hey, man, Dan Gryder's kind of a publicity.
P.T. Barnum type.
Called him a P.T. Barnum type. He gens up clicks for his YouTube channel. He's a showman, sort of. And he called Larry Carr at the FBI, and Larry goes, look, for one thing, I know who you are. I know what you're about. Number 2, McCoy is not Cooper. So I don't care what you found in McCoy's mother's barn, it's not related to Cooper because McCoy's not Cooper. And it's basically simple. It's that simple. But it gets even worse. When you actually look at this parachute that he found, it's not even remotely. Okay. So for your viewers, okay, I will break this down into my simple analogy that I use to explain why this is completely preposterous. Okay. Let's just say that DB Cooper asked for a getaway car. Okay. Yeah, DB Cooper asked for a getaway car instead of a parachute. Famous. And he gets away somehow. Well, we have the owner of the getaway car saying it was a Ford Mustang. We had the media at the time saying, yeah, it was a Ford Mustang that they gave him. They got it from some guy. We have the mechanic. We have the car salesman of the Mustang saying, oh, yeah, that's the Mustang that I sold that guy, and yada, 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 yada. Ford Mustang, Ford Mustang, Ford Mustang. Okay. The mechanic back then for the Mustang says, yeah, it was a Ford Mustang, but it was just a basic Mustang. When the FBI said, what kind of Mustang was it that this guy had? He goes, mechanic says it was just a basic one. Well, fast forward 40 years, this mechanic of the Mustang starts saying, actually, it was my Ford Mustang. It wasn't a Mustang that I fixed up and sold. It was my Mustang. And guess what? It was souped up like crazy. It had like nitrous oxide engines and it was all customized or whatever. Well, now Dan Gryder goes into this barn, and instead of finding a Ford Mustang that is, even though instead of finding a Ford Mustang, Dan Gryder found a Chevy. Okay. He found a Chevy Camaro and not a Mustang, and not even a Chevy Camaro that's functional. This parachute that he found isn't even a functional parachute. It's got pieces that are not. This is such a Frankenstein's monster parachute. You talk to master riggers. I've talked to the people who their job is parachutes. This is like a car that has like the steering wheel is not connected to the axle or something. Like it is such a non-functional piece of garbage parachute. And like I said, not only is it a Ford Mustang, you know, we're looking for, he found a Chevy getaway car, and he's going to the media saying this Chevy getaway car. And the crazy part of it is, on his documentaries, he keeps saying, he goes, you know, basically in his documentaries, Dan Gryder is relying on this description of this souped up Ford Mustang that this mechanic started telling lies. So this mechanic 40 years later starts telling lies about what the Mustang was, some souped up thing. Well, even in Dan's video, he's like, this is the souped up Ford Mustang I found. And everybody's watching going, everybody's watching going, that's a Chevy. It's not even a Ford. So like what I mean by that is we're looking for a Navy parachute. Navy parachutes and Air Force parachutes are different creatures. They have different things, different slides. Okay. No one has ever said anything other than Navy parachute. The guy who owned the parachute, who gave them, who lent them to Cooper, because they called a guy when they're looking for parachutes. Where do I get parachutes from? They knew of a local stunt pilot. Hey, you have 2 parachutes? Yeah, I've got 2. Okay. They said, what are these parachutes? They're Navy emergency backpacks. They contact the guy who packed the parachutes, these professional riggers. He goes, yeah, I packed those 5 months ago. There were Navy parachutes. Navy. Well, Dan finds an Air Force parachute. So like, it's not even, like I said, that's why there's the Ford and the Chevy comparison. It's like,
yeah, he didn't do his basic homework.
Yeah, he didn't even do his basic homework.
Car, you know.
Yeah, he found the wrong thing completely, and he's on CNN with 2 million views. Yeah. on video.
And it sounds good to them. Looks good to them.
Yeah, it sounds good to them.
Yeah, if he says so, he must be right.
Okay, but the thing is, okay, so how did he find this family to begin with, this McCoy family? Because now the son is doing interviews saying that his mother was involved, that his father was the DB Cooper. So how's this all happening?
He sought them out because early in this case, this is how I know it, and it might have come around different from when Ryan caught wind of it, but there's all DB Cooper podcast called the Cooper Vortex, hosted by a good friend of Ryan and myself named Darren Schaefer. And Dan Gryder started circulating a message on his YouTube channel that I'm going to solve DB Cooper, period. And I'm going to make sure that everybody believes that I've solved it. I'm going to leave nothing on the table. I'm going to make sure everyone's a believer. And his goal was to convince Darren Schaefer as the host of the All DB Cooper podcast. So he comes on to the DB Cooper podcast, All DB Cooper podcast, and he doesn't say who he thinks DB Cooper was. He's just kind of tantalizing, and he's saving that for his own broadcast on his own YouTube channel, which I think at the time had around 60,000 subscribers. And his YouTube channel is mainly about plane crash investigations where planes have crashed, and he goes in there and studies them. And this guy's got kind of a checkered past. He's been in trouble for slander before and some other things, and I won't get too much into his background, but it's a little murky to say the least. But anyway, his show comes out on his own channel. I think he called it Deep Family Secrets or something like that. And he presents this whole large case of why he believes Richard Floyd McCoy was DB Cooper. And most experts at the case, like Ryan, have already ruled out a guy like McCoy, who did pull off a similar hijacking in 1972, just about, I think, 5 months after DB Cooper. Yeah. So that is true. He did hijack a plane in a similar way. A lot of people think he improved on Cooper's hijacking. I personally don't. But anyway, he does his whole big show. He's got a lot of views. He goes back to Darren Schaefer, to my knowledge, and says, hey, did I convince you? And he had already sought out Richard McCoy's son, whose name is Rick. He's actually, I think, Richard III, and his daughter. Her name is Shantae. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And sought them out, and I think they had a babysitter involved, and they basically kind of said they weren't really sure where he was that night. But you have to remember, the children were very young during the Cooper hijacking. I think Rick was, 3, and Shantae was a little older.
He was 2.
Okay.
They were 2 and 5. Yeah.
2 and 5. Okay. Respectively. Very young children. They're not going to remember a whole lot. But anyway, Dan went back to Darren and said, hey, did I convince you that I'm right, that Richard Floyd McCoy was DB Cooper? And Darren said, frankly, no. And Dan just lost it. He was really upset. He wanted a meeting with Darren. He wanted to fly to Denver, to talk to Darren, who lives outside of Denver. I don't give anything away, Darren. But just totally, almost irate that Darren was not convinced by this video. So after doing such, Dan knew to try to convince a mass audience of people that he was correct about McCoy being Cooper, he had to come up with one of two things. And that was either the money, one of the $20 bills that are all still missing, except for the $5,800 that was found, or the parachute. So he chooses the latter, and he comes up with a parachute, which we've already known about for, I think, a couple of years, Ryan?
2 years.
And,
yeah. It was
we've known about that. Yeah. So it's like, I call it the Bill Cosby effect, where, Bill Cosby was doing bad things for years and years, and no one really knew about it till a obscure comedian brings it up in a comedy show. And now everybody's like, wait, I didn't know Bill Cosby did all that. That's how it kind of was for us, because we already knew about the parachute. And when people like Ryan first saw it, the picture of Dan holding it up, we immediately knew it was wrong, because it had something called D rings on it, which allows a reserve chute to be attached to the rear chute. And we knew that DB Cooper, not only, like Ryan mentioned, jumped with a Navy backpack, an NB rig. This one that Gryder showed had D rings on it. And we know for a fact that DB Cooper's did not. So therein lies the rest of the story. This is more Dan Gryder basically tripling down on the fact that McCoy has to be DB Cooper. And that's not even getting to separate reasons. There's two things going on. One, this parachute, like Ryan said, is not even close to being accurate. Number two, there's a million reasons why Richard Floyd McCoy was not DB Cooper.
Well, and so let me jump in, is that Dan did the similar thing to me recently, that he did to Darren Schaefer a couple years ago, where he wanted Darren Schaefer, because Darren had this Cooper podcast. For some reason, Dan isn't satisfied convincing a million people who don't know any better. He wants to convince the hardcore Cooperites, the several hundred of us, the vortex, we call it. And so a couple of years ago, he goes on Darren's podcast and begs Darren to say, you need to announce that I solved it. And Darren was like, no. Well, I go on Dan's show. I've never met Dan, and I had no interactions with him. And I had heard bad things, but I will give anybody a chance once, because I don't have to believe what people say. So I gave him a chance. He messages me, because I'm kind of a visible face kind of the vortex at this moment. He messages me and says, hey, I was in a plane crash last year, which he was. He actually crashed and destroyed a Lockheed Electra, an original one, which is what Amelia Earhart was flying. But anyway, he was in a bad plane crash and he lived. But he messages me out of the blue and says, hey, will you come on my show and give me 10 minutes of your time? And I've been out of the vortex for a while, and I want you to just list off a name of all the suspects who you know of lately. I'm like, okay, sure, I'll come on your show, Dan. He goes, oh yeah, you can. He goes, you can discuss Cooper, the upcoming Cooper conference. You can plug your YouTube channel, whatever. I'm like, okay, sure. So I go on there, and within 5 minutes, it like turns, and he becomes really antagonistic toward me. And, oh, well, guess what? You don't know. I've solved this case, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm going, Dan, ambushed. I'm like, I was ambushed. I was like, okay, Dan. I was like, I just kind of smiled and I was being very polite. I was like, okay, Dan. Okay. And, when we get off of it, it wasn't a live show, and I actually said, will you send me a copy of this interview when we're done with it? He said he would. He never did. Because he was going to, sure enough, he edited the hell out of it to make me look like an idiot. Of course he did. And I was like, you prick, but when we're done with it, he starts emailing me, you'd owe a duty to everybody to tell the truth that this case is solved. And I'm going, Dan, it's not solved. You've done nothing, because it's not McCoy. And it's literally, my grandfather, Drew's dad, your father, Norene, is more likely to be Cooper than McCoy. Like, there is, and I mean that, like, there is no chance. The FBI they were on their knees trying to make McCoy Cooper. They could not do it. There's a great quote from the FBI, from the head of the FBI's Portland office in the 80s saying, look, if we could have made McCoy to be Cooper, we would have done so, full stop. But we never did because he's not D.B. Cooper. That's just like a direct quote.
That's a harsh statement. That's a real harsh statement. But
yeah, it's like we wanted him to be. But the guy, the most basic knocks on this McCoy guy, if people are wondering, is several things. I'll just go through them very briefly. For one thing, he's 5 months after the hijacking. Okay. His photograph, color photographs, film footage, side profile, standing is shown to all the witnesses. Some of these witnesses, including the stewardess Tina Mucklow, spent 5 hours sitting right next to DB Cooper. 5 hours with this guy. Immediately, Tina goes, that's not him. Sorry. Full stop. Not him. She was even able to point out differences. She was like, his nose is too big. Nose is too big. He's got less hair than Cooper had. His ears stick out. Yada, yada, big yada. Ears. Big ears. So all 10 of the Cooper eyewitnesses, we have all these, and this isn't just me talking. Here's the difference in me and Dan Gryder. You'll notice Dan Gryder will never on his shows show actual documentation. Never. I, on my shows, will always pull up usually documents from the FBI files to back up what I'm saying. Because as a lawyer, that's what we do. We have to have, we can't just talk. Okay. You could, but I don't do that. I like facts. So this is all verified. Okay. The FBI, they've released 1,600 pages of Richard McCoy documents from their investigation of him into DB Cooper. 1,600 pages. Okay. They were looking at his credit card statements, phone records. They wanted him to be Cooper so bad, but he wasn't because the witnesses said he's not. He was born with a birth defect that caused him to have a permanent lisp. He had a higher pitched voice than normal. He had a Southern accent. He was from the sticks of North Carolina. Like, he's a Southerner like me. Cooper spoke intelligently, articulately, with a low voice, and a Midwestern accent. In fact, McCoy's voice was so weird that during his own hijacking in April, when the pilots are interviewed after he jumps out, they're just, we have all these interviews documented by the FBI. The pilot's like, that guy, the hijacker, when he was talking to us on the phone back there, I think he was disguising his voice. So like the pilot's like, hey guys, I think he was disguising his voice. That's just the way he talked. And like, no one said Cooper. Everyone said Cooper had a very flat, monotone voice. So there's that. McCoy wore a crazy outfit. He wore blue bell-bottom pants, a giant wig, fake mustache, mirrored sunglasses, like I said, bell-bottom pants, a colorful shirt, a red jacket. Like, his idea was to like make himself dress like a clown so people wouldn't. I don't even know what his thought was, because whereas DB Cooper just wore a pair of sunglasses, DB Cooper's disguise was blending in. That was his genius. That was the genius of Cooper, is that he dressed like everybody else and didn't stand out. And as a consequence, the passengers never knew they were even being hijacked, which is remarkable until they got off the plane. In fact, we talked to these guys. Bill Mitchell sat across from Cooper for hours. Bill says that they get off the plane in Seattle, and there's a guy standing out there, and they're like, "What's going on?" He goes, "You guys were hijacked." He was like, "What?" It's like, "Yeah, there's a hijacker." And he goes, "Oh, that's the guy I was sitting next to. Holy crap!" And
he had no idea.
No
idea whatsoever.
Whereas McCoy is like, for one thing, he's obviously nervous. He accidentally locks himself in the bathroom. A stewardess has to let the hijacker out of the bathroom because he locked himself in there. His makeup is dripping and drips off his face. He has this like swarthy makeup on. As Drew and I love to say, this man was so nervous that he left his ransom note in an envelope in the terminal where he had been sitting at the boarding gate.
Forgot it.
He forgot it. So they're about to taxi away from before he starts the hijacking, a gate agent walks onto the plane going, "Did anybody leave their envelope in the boarding area? Oh my God." He jumps up and grabs it. Don't open it.
Yeah.
He was like, "Oh shoot."
That's real slick. That's really improving on DB Cooper, isn't it?
Yeah. And so there's that. But mainly, I guess if you want other stuff too, he had a scar on his face, and McCoy during his hijacking covered it up with a Band-Aid. Cooper wasn't wearing any Band-Aids to cover up scars from the war or anything. He was just sitting there. McCoy was not a smoker. Drew has spoken to people who served with McCoy in Vietnam.
Yeah, said he never touched a cigarette in Vietnam. A guy that was on his first, McCoy did 2 terms in Vietnam. Very brave guy, and that'll come up too. He did 2 tours in the first as a demo team. It's about part of Special Forces. He was a Green Beret. I'm one of the first people that got that out there because I was at Cooper for so long. We didn't even know for sure if he was a Green Beret or not, or that was just put out there. But he actually was. He was a Green Beret on his first tour in Vietnam. The guy I spoke to, Norman, said he never touched a cigarette or any form of alcohol while in Vietnam. He was a very strict Mormon. Very strict Mormon too, and he was would never defy that. Of course, Mormons aren't supposed to hijack airplanes, but he was under so much.
That's
money
not in the Book of Mormon.
That he did. No, yeah, true. But no, he never even touched a cigarette, even in a combat situation or after in Vietnam. So why would he?
And
want
Cooper
to
is
smoke
known
8
as
cigarettes?
Yeah, Cooper's just chain smoking. Cooper even peer pressures the stewardess into taking a cigarette. He's like, "Hey, you smoke?"
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and she goes, "No, I quit." He goes, "Well, do you want one anyway?" Okay, sure. Yeah. So, like one of the things they discussed, she says in her FBI interview, 15 minutes after getting off the plane, they're like, "What were you talking about?" She goes, "We were talking about smoking habits and things." Like, okay, Cooper's a heavy smoker.
It was clear he was a heavy smoker. It was clear Cooper
he's
was
just
a heavy
chugging
smoker,
away.
McCoy could not have been. McCoy was a Mormon Sunday school teacher. There's no way he's even sneaking cigarettes back then.
And we know that McCoy is back there eating candy during his own hijacking. The FBI files are saying he's chowing down on candy back there.
Why wouldn't he smoke on his flight? That's a great point. Why wouldn't he smoke on his own hijacking when he smoked 8 Raleigh filter tips on the Cooper plane, which makes no sense. Plus, of course, his age he was 28, right? In 71, Ryan? I think he was 28. Yeah. People like to say, "Oh, well, he looked older for his age," but Tina Mucklow, being younger, could have easily picked up on just conceptually that she's talking about a younger guy. One of his neighbors described in the newspaper, Richard Floyd McCoy, is literally a kid, the kid next door. So everybody that described DB Cooper said middle age, anywhere from 42 up to 51,
50
that
something
sweet spot. Yeah.
Yeah, McCoy, all of the witnesses, if you look at the FBI files from his own hijacking in April, it's called Saljack, which is the Salt Lake City hijacking. They call it Saljack, whereas Nordjack is what they call the Cooper case because it's the Northwest Orient hijacking, Nordjack. But Saljack, which is McCoy's hijacking, all of the witnesses, none of them put the hijacker's age above 30, like literally not a single one. Okay, put his age above. So we can say now, yeah, looking back, he looks old, but your age is relative to when you live, to how everybody looks around you at the time, right? And so, I go look at yearbook photos from the 90s or whatever when I was in high school or something, and I'm like, geez, we look like old people compared to kids now, or whatever. People, So everybody said McCoy was in his 20s. All the witnesses to Cooper said mid 40s, even into his 50s. He was an older guy. They talked about the wrinkles around his mouth. He was balding. Well, McCoy was balding, I guess, but essentially another thing too, the guy was on campus. He was this BYU student. Okay. He was on campus writing checks using his credit card the day before the hijacking. He was on campus witnessed by people the day of the hijacking, but his class didn't take roll that day. So there's actually not the coup de grace where it's like he was actually there, but people saw him there. Cooper hijacking happens the evening before Thanksgiving. Okay, jumps out around 8 p.m., which is 9 p.m. Provo, Utah time, which is where McCoy lives. McCoy hosts the next day for Thanksgiving lunch. He has like a Thanksgiving brunch. He hosts Filipino exchange students at his house from BYU. So like there are Filipino exchange students testifying to the FBI. Oh yeah, we were there. We got there about 10 o'clock and he was playing with the kids on the couch, whatever. Like, you're not jumping out in 800 miles away into southern Washington and going all the way to Utah the same day. The whole thing is preposterous. Everything about McCoy is based on a book called The Real McCoy, which was written in the 80s. And there's only about 400 copies of it. And Gryder's got one of them. I actually have one of them. But it was a book that came out that was alleging by an FBI agent and a probation officer alleging that McCoy was Cooper. McCoy's widow, because McCoy ended up being convicted and sentenced to 45 years for his hijacking. He busts out 2 years later and is killed by the FBI.
I didn't know that. Oh.
Yeah. So he ends up being killed. McCoy is a real kind of a sullen. Listen, so thing about McCoy is the guy was a genuine war hero. He won a Distinguished Flying Cross, which is right below the Medal of Honor. He is as brave as they come, but he came back from the war with some serious PTSD. He was listed as psychologically as having suicidal ideations. So he had suicidal thoughts a lot, major PTSD. He had terrible migraines from some kind of injury, concussion, probably from the war. He used to bang his head up against the wall because I guess that felt better than his migraines. But he was a criminal justice major at BYU at the time, and he wrote a term paper that spring on hijacking, on DB Cooper specifically.
Interesting enough.
He basically became a Cooper fanboy and was like, you know what? You know, I make no money. I get VA. My wife works for like with the welfare department. He, you know, was barely educated, going to college. That, you know, he said, you know what? Somehow he got the idea that he was either going to kill himself at some point, that he wasn't going to be able to help himself. He was going to kill himself. This is all in the FBI files from interviews they did with him. He was going to commit suicide at some point, just on his own, or he thought he had a brain tumor. He thought maybe there was a brain tumor in his head causing these headaches, right? So it's kind of this guy thinks I'm going to die anyway. I may as well go jump out with $500,000. And he's telling his buddies this, going, you know what?
Yeah.
If I did a Cooper hijacking, I would ask for $500,000.
Not
so he writes this
200,000.
term paper. Yeah, he writes this term paper on DB Cooper. And at some point, he admits to the judge, we have his testimony to the judge at his sentencing. He's like, you know, I got obsessed with the idea of being Cooper. I used to imagine myself in the role, even though I'm the criminal justice guy. I'm like, you know what? I'd rather be this guy than the guy chasing him. And Cooper got away with it, right? And so he's like, I could do that. I could get away with it too. And he didn't, because he ran his mouth to too many people. His sister-in-law, who was a fool, knew about it. And so the night of his own hijacking, a buddy of his calls the McCoy house. This is McCoy's hijacking, not Cooper. Calls McCoy's house and goes, hey, where's Richard? There's a skyjacker like coming toward Utah, because he jumped out over Utah. He gave pilots directions right over his house, essentially, to jump out at the back of it. And they're like, oh, there's a skyjacker coming toward Utah. Where's Richard? And his sister-in-law goes, he's not here. I think it's him. and like, and the buddy, and get this, the guy, his buddy who's it gets better. Yeah. The buddy who's calling saying, hey, where's Richard? Tell him to turn the TV on, is a sheriff's department, is a sheriff's office, is a sheriff's deputy. And he's like, oh crap. I thought Richard was just joking about that. Like, and he had a duty. He's like, look, I think it's my best friend. Like, I have to admit this, you know, I think this is Richard. And, you know, they caught him. The guy wasn't even smart enough to like hide the money. They found all the money in his house.
In a closet,
so, like,
I think.
In a closet. And
all
like,
but $6.
Yeah, all but yeah. It's like, man, come on.
And my favorite, Ryan, I have to tell my favorite. So McCoy, when he does his hijacking in March of 72, of course, Cooper's was April 72. Yeah. Of course, Cooper was November 71. He successfully gets to the ground. He did bring his own parachute, which people thought was an improvement. Actually, I found out today, I didn't even know his wife bought him that parachute. So it's not one that he owned and liked to jump with. His wife bought him this pink parachute that he brought on the plane. And somehow something went wrong on the plane, and the parachute got caught under a seat or something and actually deployed. It came out of its container and knocked one of the stewardesses out after it came out of its. I mean, it was just a comedy of errors. But somehow McCoy makes it to the ground with his $500,000, and he hitchhikes a ride from a 16-year-old guy named Pete Zimmerman, who probably hasn't even been driving that long. And he has Pete take him to a place called, I think, the High Spot, where Richard got a milkshake and maybe a hamburger. That was where part of the loot was buying this stuff. But he literally had Pete Zimmerman, I know this for a fact now, had him take him home directly to his house in Provo. I mean, not down he didn't say, just, you know, drop me off here at the edge of the neighborhood. No, Pete took him directly to where he lived. That isn't DB Cooper, folks. I mean, Cooper was slick. Yeah. That's not too smart to have. You know, I know Richard Floyd McCoy's parents were first cousins that married, but that's crazy to have the hitchhiker take you directly to your home, where he easily identified him as well. Pete Zimmerman did.
Yeah, what's interesting too is the FBI files. When you read through the FBI interviews with McCoy, they're even saying after they're done talking to him, they're like, this guy thinks he's smarter than we are, but he's not that smart. Like, they're actually saying that. They're like, this guy's not that smart. And the thing about McCoy is I want to just like, me and Drew are actually McCoy fans in a way. Like, we're not.
Story. Tell the helicopter story though. That's the greatest.
Yeah. I mean, here's the best story. So McCoy at the time of the hijacking was still in the National Guard. He had come back from Vietnam, his second tour. He wanted a third tour. Probably, remember, suicidal ideations.
His wife wouldn't let him. Yep.
Yeah, she said, I'll divorce you. I mean, maybe he wanted to go die, I guess, in battle, honorably or something instead of suicide, right? Maybe he was, I mean, a lot of those guys had death wishes.
Right.
I think it's probably why I want to go back. So he wanted to die in combat. So anyway, he's still in the National Guard flying helicopters at the time of the hijacking. Well, the next morning after he lands his parachute, he stashes the money. He gets a ride with this kid back to his house. He gets in his car. And of course, I'm sure the sister-in-law's going, I didn't say nothing to nobody. Nobody called, but because the sister-in-law was staying with them. Anyway, so he gets his wife. They drive back to where he stashed the money and the parachutes and stuff. And they pick it up and they go home and he sleeps in his bed that night. Okay. The next morning, he gets a phone call. He's woken up by a phone call in his house at 5 a.m. Hey, Richard, we need you to go down to the guard center. We need you to go search for the hijacker. So McCoy flies a helicopter for the National Guard looking for himself. He's part of the search for himself.
Yeah,
which
he's
is
searching
kind of
for himself.
comical.
His own helicopter.
There is literally film footage of a Huey flying over Provo the next day. That is Richard McCoy flying inside looking for himself. Yeah.
I love it.
So,
that's why we love it. It's a great story.
It's a great story, but about 2 days later, he's caught, ends up it was a death penalty case. So people in the audience may not know this. Hijacking was a death penalty case at the time, but it was a capital crime. And he was being sentenced. When he got convicted, the jury was deliberating. They had the option to do death penalty, but literally that same week was when they overturned the death penalty in 1972 and temporarily. And the jury was informed, hey, there's no death penalty. They weren't going to do that anyway for him. I mean, none of those guys got death penalty anyway, but he gets 45 years. He escapes twice from prison, actually. Well, he escapes from custody when they're transporting him to prison. Then 2 years later, using like a fake, I think he used a bar of soap to look like a gun or something. He escapes.
Made a gun out of soap or no dental paste or something. Yeah.
So yeah, he escapes in this dramatic thing. He goes on this crime spree with another guy who was actually part of the 10 Most Wanted. They do some kidnappings and it's really ugly. And he ends up being killed in this gun battle in 1974. So his story is really, really interesting. He was a Green Beret, like I said. Then he goes and becomes a chopper pilot. But he's not Cooper because, like I said, he couldn't talk right. He, looked different. He was way too younger. He admitted being a Cooper fanboy.
Very nervous during his hijacking, which Cooper was described as being calm the whole time.
Why would you be more nervous your second time? Right?
Yeah, you should be a little. Your second time you should be a little more calm instead of the whole plane knowing it's being hijacked.
Okay, so this Dan Gryder obviously has been in contact with the FBI and has had conversations with the FBI. So why does he continue saying that McCoy is D.B. Cooper when actually I think he maybe really knows that he isn't?
I think he does. I think he's a true believer. Like I've actually contemplated this because I'm going, Dan, does this guy? I mean, I've communicated with Dan. He is either the most stubborn human being who's ever lived, or he really believes it. And I think he really believes it, but he's the only one. I mean, listen, I told Drew this, and he's right that like I guarantee you, nobody interacts with more people in the Cooper world than I do on a daily basis. It's constant.
Yeah.
Okay. And I like everybody who messages me, it's fine. I love all you guys, but like
you'll get more.
There is nobody. Yeah, I'll get more. Not a single one. I mean, I'm. This is a
He's right. This is a big statement.
This is a true statement. If I like could collectively like combine somehow with God mode, if I could pick the 300 people on Earth who know the most about the DB Cooper case, just God mode all of them, Not a single one would say it was McCoy. In fact, I don't think a single one would even entertain the fact
It's true.
that it was McCoy. Like, I mean, no chance. Like
That's
it
harsh.
may as well be, he may as well be like, Ronald McDonald. I mean, saying that Ronald McDonald's Cooper. Like, and something else I got to point out about McCoy. The reason why people get so obsessed with McCoy, I think, who don't know much about the case, is because they think he's the only guy who did this. It's like him and Cooper, right? So it's him and Cooper who did this crime. Not true. 5 other people that same spring jumped out of planes with money, holding money. All of them lived. All of them got away temporarily, It was a fad. Cooper started a craze of parajackings. They're called parachute hijackings. McCoy was just one of these guys and wasn't the first, wasn't the last. I'm actually good friends with one of the guys. His name's Martin McNally. He's 81 years old. He spent 38 years in prison for this. He came to CooperCon last year and talked to all of us. He's a real life DB Cooper. He's one of these guys. But like, McCoy's not unique. And I think that people think McCoy is unique. And I think that's because usually when you ask people just calmly, okay, look, because McCoy people are very aggressive. How do you say it's not McCoy? I'm like, well,
Looks just like the sketch.
Yeah, I was like, I look like the sketch. Like everyone looks like the sketch. I mean, there's 5 different sketches anyway. So
yeah,
they're all different, and they're all different people. But when you ask them, you say, well, what is it about McCoy? Like, just tell me. Why do you think it's McCoy? And they go, well, he did the same crime. I'm like, well, okay. There's a lot of bank robbers out there. Just because you rob one bank doesn't mean you're the same guy who robbed another one. It was like a fad. 16 guys tried to do the same hijacking. 5 actually jumped out of the plane with money. So it was a fad, and it lasted the spring of 72. Yeah, it was a fad. So he wasn't unique, wasn't special. And I think people think he's special. And also another thing too, the Unsolved Mysteries episode features Richard McCoy. So the famous, every time Unsolved Mysteries showed the DB Cooper segment, there was the ding, 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 update, and they like showed like Richard McCoy Jr. and they zoom in and there's Robert Stack's voice, Richard McCoy Jr. 5 months later pulled off the same hijacking. Could he be the real guy? And like all this creepy music and the sketches and mind.
Okay, so they have.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, they have. Okay, they have a letter. They have his handwriting, DB Cooper's handwriting. So
no.
Oh, they don't.
No.
Wait a minute. Didn't the stewardess pick up a letter off the floor of the airplane with the note in it?
No. Oh, okay. No. Okay. Cooper took that with him when he jumped.
Oh, so there is no handwriting.
Nope. No. In fact, Norene Cooper was so, like, I guess we call it anal about taking things with him, that when the girl was lighting, because he kept his right hand in the briefcase bomb the whole time, okay, and he was smoking with his left hand. So she's lighting. He has matches with him on board. She's lighting his cigarettes with matches. Cool guy with sunglasses, and and when she strikes the last match from one of his matchbooks, she just, she puts it in the seat pocket of the chair in front of her, as you do with trash on a plane, right? And Cooper goes, no, give me that back. And like, she gives him out of the trash the empty matchbook. He takes it with him. And the only thing he left on the plane was his cigarettes and his tie, which his tie, people can debate about this. I think my thought on why he left the tie, because he was so ridiculous about taking everything with him, just a brain fart. Because as a guy, when we take ties off, we have this instinct of just throwing it on the nearest thing. It's almost like a reflex, at least for me. It goes on the bed, it goes on the dresser, it goes on the sofa. I mean, it's instant, like
get rid of it.
Yeah. And I think he just put it there, and it was dark back there when he jumped. I think he had other things on his mind, and it was a brain fart, essentially. They left this tie on the plane. I don't think it was a calling card or anything. But point is, McCoy had 2 of his handwritten notes pocketed by stewardesses. They put them in their bras. Okay. So McCoy had his handwriting was taken. He left fingerprints all over the plane.
On a glass, I think a glass that he drank
out
of.
Yeah. He was reading through a magazine and left his fingerprints on a magazine. He wasn't a very good criminal because he wasn't a criminal. essentially. He was nervous because he was a good guy, essentially. Everybody in the neighborhood was like, this is the guy who's out. He was a soldier. I mean, everybody's like, he's the guy who's out shoveling snow without asking. The whole neighborhood's like, he always shoveled driveways full of snow. He's just the nicest guy. It's the comments you read from when you read the articles about him from back then in 72 and you read the contemporary articles.
They were shocked.
They're like, he's our Sunday school teacher. He'd give you the shirt off his back. What is he doing? Why is he doing this? You know, Cooper was at ease threatening people's lives, I think. He didn't seem to be bothered by saying, I'll kill you. Because, I mean, he seriously looked at the stewardess and said, we will die right now if I click this thing together. We'll all be dead. And he seemed comfortable doing that. So they're just different personalities.
They didn't get any DNA off that tie, did they?
They did, but it's not okay. So they got 3 in 2001. They sent that tie off to be tested. They recovered 3 partial DNA profiles. Okay, but they are so fragmentary that essentially the FBI crime lab has told the agents that there are millions of people who could test positive as having partial, because it's a partial profile. Okay, so it's not a full profile, and it's highly unlikely that any of those profiles are DB Cooper's, because that tie they sent that tie around for 30 years. Because what they used to do is, whenever they would have a suspect who was a decent suspect, what they used to do is literally the Seattle office of the FBI, they'd put the tie in a priority mail envelope and send it to the FBI office in Phoenix. Okay. And those guys would go show the tie, and because it had this unique tie clip on it, they would go show the tie and the tie clip to the ex-wife of some guy, right? Was this your ex-husband's tie? Let me look at it. No. And hand it back. And they did this for decades. So it's highly unlikely that any of that DNA is actually Cooper's. So the only chance for Cooper DNA, this is the only chance in my opinion, really, is Cooper left a head hair on his headrest that was recovered. And so there is a hair, but it's lost.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was mounted on a microscope slide because back in the day, you've probably seen this, they used to do what's called hair microscopy, where if they found a hair from a crime scene, they could compare that hair, like if they found a hair on a girl's body or something, right? They would compare that hair to the hair of a suspect. It's considered junk science now. The Supreme Court threw it out. The FBI had to give new trials to a lot of people because people who were convicted because of this hair stuff. But anyway, at the time in 71, they mounted Cooper's hair on a slide. McCoy's hair was tested, no match, by the way. But they had Cooper's hair, and the last time it was found, the last time it appears in the FBI files that they've been releasing is 1984. And so in the early 2000s, well, they also recovered cigarette butts, remember? So he smoked cigarettes. So in the early 2000s, when the FBI case agent's like, hey, let's try to get DNA on Cooper, he contacts Las Vegas. Okay, so Las Vegas, even the plane landed in Reno. Okay, so Cooper jumps out from Seattle to Reno, somewhere in Washington, but the plane lands in Reno. So the custody of everything taken from the plane is within the jurisdiction of the Las Vegas FBI office. Okay, so they maintained physical custody of whatever was taken off the plane, the tie, cigarettes, the hair, whatever. So in the early 2000s, but it's Seattle's case. Okay, so just tell your audience that the Norjack, the DB Cooper hijacking is the Seattle FBI case. Okay, it's their case. So in the early 2000s, Seattle FBI says, hey, Vegas, we have their emails basically. They're saying, hey, Vegas, will you send us those cigarette butts? Because we can get saliva DNA off of them. We know there's a hair. Will you send us the hair? And Vegas sends this rather sheepish response going, we destroyed those cigarettes in 1971. They threw them in the trash.
Oh my gosh.
Bye-bye.
Because the only use for, there was no DNA back then, right? So there was, but they didn't know about it.
The blood type.
So the only use for cigarettes was for fingerprints. So they sent these cigarettes to the crime lab and said, hey, are there fingerprints on them? Crime lab says no. They send them back to Vegas, and Vegas just throws them in the trash. Literally, they're gone. So now, if we've had those cigarettes, we could get a DNA profile really quickly. And then the hair slide, he goes, well, okay, so you destroyed the cigarettes. That sucks. What about the hair slide? We don't know where it is. It's like, so remember when I said I hate this case?
Yeah.
That's why.
It's with the lost art.
It is like
all the good evidence.
Okay, wait a minute.
Always
Okay,
so close.
now what about he didn't wear gloves, right? He had his hands exposed. Isn't there plastic on the armchairs of your seat? What did they?
He left. Okay, so they recovered. This is again, Cooper's a smart guy. They recovered they recovered 11 partial fingerprints from around his seat. Partial, all of them were partial, which either means he either wiped down everywhere he touched, or more likely, from me talking to the FBI guys, because I have a book coming out at some point eventually, when I guess after Jesus comes back, my book will come out. But, at some point, I've been working on it for 2 years.
It's coming though. It's going to be great.
I've got friends in the Vortex. They play drinking games. Every time I mention my book, they take a drink, but it's coming out eventually, but it's finished. I just have to find a publisher. Anyway, I interviewed the FBI guys who are still alive from back then. And one of the things I asked them, I said, is it like in the movies? Did they actually like put glue on their fingers and stuff? And he's like, oh yeah, because that's what they did back then. Because, fingerprints is how you got caught back then. That was the DNA of the time, right? So it's very possible that Cooper obfuscated his fingerprints. Okay. Now they did recover though a palm print. Okay. A good palm print actually from like, if you're sitting up from when you're getting up from your chair, right? You push down, they got his palm print. But the problem is the military still to this day don't take palm prints. So there's no palm prints for the military. Law enforcement did not start taking palm prints until 2003, when the NYPD and LAPD started taking palm prints as part of your standard stuff. And now everybody does it. But they have Cooper's palm print. But the problem is nobody who was around in the 70s had their palm prints taken, right? So we don't know. And that was one of the ways the FBI would get rid of suspects, is if somebody's being accused of being Cooper, they would say, okay, we have this in the files. Remember, we have all their real files now being released, like formally classified or confidential files. We can read them. They'd go to a suspect like Robert Rackstraw. We mentioned Robert Rackstraw earlier, this suspect. They go to Rackstraw, and this guy's really cute. Rackstraw is a real douchebag. Like, he was just a jerk. He liked to pretend he was Cooper. They would ask him, were you DB Cooper? He goes, I could have been. Well, like, look, I do criminal law for a living for, almost 20 years, it seems now. No criminal is going to be cute like that and like, oh, could have been me. Like, that's not how they actually act if you're a real, if you actually did a crime. So, but anyway, this Rackstraw guy, they have him in custody in 78 and for killing his stepfather. And he actually gets off on it. He probably killed the guy, but he gets off on it. But while he's in custody, they're like, can we have your palm prints? And he goes, no, I'm not giving you your palm prints. So like, oh, come on. And so the FBI contact the Attorney General's office in DC and say, can we like hold him down and like force him to give a palm print? Can we do something like that? And they're like, let's research it. Well, in between the time they're researching whether they can literally like restrain him and force him to give a palm print, he just decides one morning, yeah, here's my palm print. No match. So the only thing we got a Cooper, we have a hair and we have a palm print. So that's no handwriting, nothing. This guy existed for 5 hours and that's it. I mean, there's just nothing else.
Insane. Now, there's a question in the chat, but and I know, Drew, we did a show on DB Cooper, and we also did a show with the psychic, and she responded to your question on who she thought DB Cooper was, and she came up with that. And you both agreed on it. And so the question in the chat room is, and D3 Airspace, we did several shows, Drew and I. So she's asking, can you ask the men what they think about Ted Brandon? He was a top suspect in the DB Cooper case.
Well, I like Ted Braden. He's my guy. That's how Ryan first reached out to me. Still a Ted Braden guy. Ryan's now become one of the top guys of the case, so he knows a lot about all the suspects in general. There's some new suspects that have come out in the new files which I finally find a lot of them very interesting. Catalano, I know Brian's got one he could talk about a little bit. I can't remember his name, the guy that with the Mississippi
Lions,
connection.
Orville Lions.
Orville Lions. Yeah, he's very interesting to me too. A good friend of ours right now that's in the chat. Packer Jack's got a great new suspect named Skip Hall that has some really interesting JFK assassination ties. Makes a good Cooper suspect too. So there's a lot. The bar, like Ryan has said, even at CooperCon, the bar of suspects now are so much higher than they were even 5 or 10 years ago. They've gotten so much higher with the likes of Orville Lyons and Skip Hall, and I think Braden is up there with them as well. He's my guy. I'm the champion.
Yeah, Braden's
he's up there with the
obviously
rest of these guys.
Yeah, Drew has a book on Ted Braden, so obviously Drew has a bias there. So
for sure,
which is just fine. But in fact, Braden is actually the reason why I know Drew is I had been kind of lurking and doing Cooper stuff since 2007, 2008 when I was in law school, and then 2015 and message boards and things. And it wasn't until I need to look back and see when that was, Drew, maybe 2020 or something, maybe during COVID.
I don't know. Years ago now.
But I read his book and I've said, look, man, I've been doing this a long time. And this is the first suspect who I've come across who I think could legitimately actually be the guy. And so Braden is a little short. That's really his main knock is he was about 5'9" or so. Some people thought Cooper was 6 feet tall, but people who were under duress are known to exaggerate height. So height estimates, and look, I mean, McCoy was 5'10", and one of his stewardesses thought he was 5'5", which is weird. I mean, they go the other way. So height can be a strange thing. So Braden and this guy, Skip Hall, who we mentioned just a second ago, both those guys have so much circumstantial evidence. But the problem is you just can't ever put these people on the airplane.
That's the problem. Right? We all have Packer, me, other suspect champions.
Anybody with a suspect is you just can't put him in Portland that day, or
you can't put him in Portland or even on the plane. So and then when you're talking about the DNA, it's very bleak because at the conference that Ryan hosted along with Packer and Chris Cunningham made the DNA situation really bleak because she kept talking about how contaminated everything was. Like she would show pictures of a group of people all handling the DB Cooper's tie with their bare hands. And she said, even if this didn't happen, it wouldn't matter because this tie has already been barehanded so many times before. It's just bleak. That's why, like what Ryan says, it's so frustrating. The cigarettes are gone. But we're always holding out hope that there'll be some break somewhere. If it isn't Braden or Hall or one of the known suspects, we just want to see it solved. And that, brings me to another point, going back to the whole Gryder thing. He thinks that we're somehow making money off of this. Nobody's making money off of DB Cooper, really.
Gryder might be.
Gryder might be, but it's really more of a labor of love and friends you meet along the way. It's really true. DB Cooper, we like to say DB Cooper's a friend you meet along the way, like guys like Packer and Ryan and Nikki and people that there was such a nice group at CooperCon. An awesome tight knit group. There was an insane lady that showed up, but I think she actually had a decent suspect. So maybe we'll forgive her. But just a great group of people in general. But nobody's really making money, and that's one of the first things you see thrown back on people that are like anti Richard Floyd McCoy. Like you just don't want the case to be solved. That's so untrue. I can't even begin to describe it.
And prepare yourself. That is what Dan Gryder. I have a. It's not. I can't. I mean, I have an idea that the FBI have told him that it's bogus. Okay. And
wow,
you can, I have an idea of that.
You heard it here first.
And well, no, but I'm just saying, I have a notion that the FBI have told him that, hey man, you've caused us some problems here in the Seattle office. Cause we hate this case with a passion of 1,000 demons.
Yeah. They're
international coverage
now. So now they're getting
international
phone calls.
Yeah, tons of phone calls on obvious BS too.
On obvious BS. So a lot of people are saying, like on your comments, because Ryan, when this first came out, Ryan, is our fearless leader now, and he came up with this excellent video debunking the parachute point by point with pictures, showing examples of how the parachute Dan found wasn't right. It wasn't anything personal against Dan. It was just showing really in great detail how this is not the right parachute. The video is doing really well. I think it's up to 50,000 views, something
Yeah.
really incredible.
It's catching up to his actual video of
right,
his
which
reveal,
is great
yeah.
for a small channel.
Yeah.
That's a lot of views. But a lot of people keep, are making comments are like, well, why do they have this scene that Dan shows where the FBI shows up to collect the actual parachute? And I know Ryan mentioned that Rick McCoy mentioned how the 2 or 3 were game wardens, but Ryan is right when he says, of course, the FBI probably feels, and I think these were North Carolina agents or someone close to there, they felt the obligation to come pick up the parachute because they've always said parachutes are the money. But I'll bet anybody dollars to donuts that you're never going to hear another word about that parachute, good or bad. You're not going to have an official statement from the FBI.
They might. They might.
Okay, maybe they will.
Just to shut the media up. I mean, that's the thing. Is this has so much media coverage because normally they don't comment on false leads, like Drew's saying.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, they don't.
How many bogus tips do the FBI get every day? They don't go to they don't comment on them.
Yes, and if it was true, they would tell you that as well. And a good example I had of that coming out of the Zodiac case is when the 3 gentlemen decoded the 340 Zodiac killer cipher. The FBI put out an official notice saying these guys are correct. This is solved to our satisfaction. They showed us how they did it. They solved one of the Zodiac killer's long ciphers. It took over 50 years to break. 3 very smart guys, a computer, a mathematician, Dave Aranchek out of Virginia, and they actually wrote them a letter on FBI letterhead, signed off on, you guys have solved this, you're correct. I don't think Dan's going to be getting one of those for that parachute is what I'm saying.
So what I'm saying is be prepared. So Dan's attack on us for debunking him is, well, they don't want it solved because this is their cash cow. And I'm like,
yes,
bro, DB Cooper he's eventually going to extort $200,000 out of me too. With what I've spent.
Look at everything behind Ryan. Look at everything behind Ryan. These are like nice examples of parachute he's got. He's got an actual money behind him. This stuff costs money.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I mean, I lose money on this, a lot of money actually on this.
Yeah,
and so that's
getting
just
rich
stupid
off of DB Cooper.
And look, man, nobody wants this case solved more than us. Like that's so dumb. But anyway, that's his attack on us critics. Okay. His attack on the FBI, you're about to see it. I guarantee you. He's about to release a video where he says, well, you can't trust the FBI because they told the public that Cooper died. And they don't want to admit that he lived because they don't want to admit it was McCoy because McCoy lived. So they have a vested interest. I promise you that's what's about to happen. And yeah, the FBI liked to say to the media that he died. Now, the behind closed doors, when you talk to them, the old guys you talk to now, they're like, oh yeah, we know he survived. Right. But they told the media back then they died for 2 reasons. I mean, what are they going to say? Well, hell, I guess he got away. No, they're not going to say that. And number 2, they didn't want to encourage copycats. It's like, well, don't do drugs, kids. If you jump out of it, if you do this crime, you'll die like Cooper did. They didn't want to encourage copycats. And I laughed with one of the original agents, John Detler, who was there from 71. I said, well, that didn't work, did it? He was like, no, because they had 16 copycats. But no, I guarantee you, he has to now discredit the FBI because they're going to say it's not the parachute, or he has to discredit the fact that my video has the FBI files saying it's. Remember, the FBI files all say it's a Ford Mustang getaway car, right? And Dan found a Chevy. Dan found an obvious Chevy, and so now that he's being called out on it, well, those records are wrong, or whatever, right? It's just, so the main thing is
attack the messenger.
And he's going to say, I promise you, all of you watching this, his next video, I promise, he's going to say, the FBI have a vested interest because they told the media that Cooper died. They don't want to admit it's McCoy because McCoy lived. I guarantee you that will be his next. The last bastion of people with no integrity.
But you don't think he's going to back off the parachute at all, though? Like,
no.
He's going to claim for life that parachute was Cooper's. Think about this just on its onset. We know DB Cooper jumped somewhere along the state line of Oregon and Washington State, near the Columbia River, anywhere in there. Is he really going to take this heavy parachute with him all the way back to Provo, Utah, and then it's going to eventually land back in North Carolina where he's originally from? That's absurd that someone would drag
whenever I commit
evidence of a crime with him.
Yeah, whenever I commit a capital crime, I'm definitely going to take the evidence to my mom's place and be like, here you go. Here's a souvenir.
It's
It's a
brilliant.
souvenir of my involvement in this capital crime. And by the way, we're going to point out real quick. Remember, I mentioned earlier that all this McCoy stuff came from this bogus book that was written in the mid 80s. Well, McCoy's widow sued to stop that book because McCoy's widow was an accomplice in his, she made the wig and everything. She was an accomplice in his April 72 hijacking.
Okay.
She really was. And, but this book though, because this book came out saying that McCoy's Cooper, the book also implies that she was an accomplice in that case. Now there was no legal, there would have been no legal liability. There's a 5-year statute of limitations for accomplices. So it wasn't like she could have been in trouble, even if she could have admitted that it was McCoy at that point in the 80s and not faced any consequences. But she sued them in federal court for defamation because they're saying that I was involved in the Cooper hijacking with my husband. And she's like, I was Thanksgiving. I was home for Thanksgiving that day. Right. But she sued them and won. Now, if you know anything about the legal system, like it's hard to win a defamation case. Like it's really hard because the way to win a defamation case is basically this. Say that I said that Drew was DB Cooper. Okay. And Drew says, I'm not Cooper. I'm going to sue you for saying that. Drew has to prove to the court that I knew or should have known that he's not actually DB Cooper. He has to basically prove to the court that I'm lying. Okay. Now, she didn't win the case outright, but it settled out of court. And part of the settlement was they couldn't publish any more books. So she won essentially, obviously, because they were going to lose at trial. So they did the settlement. Now that means that she was going to prove at trial that the authors of this book, who one of them was an FBI agent at the time, knew or should have known that DB Cooper and McCoy weren't the same person. And in fact, what's great is we have FBI files. Remember, we have all their files now. We have these files from when this is occurring. And there's an FBI file between two FBI guys gossiping. And it's like, basically one of them says, man, can you believe that Calumet is writing a book saying that McCoy is Cooper? He must be doing this for the money because there's no way he actually believes that. So like that's their gossip. And then we have Karen McCoy herself calls the Seattle office. We have this memo. We call them 302s, which are FBI documents. Karen McCoy herself in the 80s calls and says, hey, there's a former FBI agent harassing me about my husband being DB Cooper. This is preposterous. My husband was not DB Cooper. This is an outrage. Okay. And this is private communications with FBI agents, right? So, she's, like I said, there's no universe or galaxy or dimension where, McCoy and Cooper are the same person. So like I said, she basically won a defamation suit to get this book halted. And this book is full of lies too. I mean, the book lies and says, that, Cooper had typewritten notes just like McCoy did. He did not.
Yeah. How did he improve on the hijacking? He got caught. I never understood that. McCoy improved upon it. How? He got caught. Cooper didn't. How's that an improvement?
No, the whole thing is preposterous, but really it's almost an expose on the media more than anything, that they'll just run with anything. It reminds me of, there's a great quote that says, falsehoods fly and then truth comes limping behind. So you can just say whatever you want to say and people who don't care, they'll believe it. Like the Amelia Earhart plane that they found, right? I mean, people like Drew and I who are discerning, who know what a Lockheed Electra looks like, go, well, those wings don't look like an Electra's wings.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because they're straight. The wings on Electra are like this,
the other ones
from
above.
And they're like fighter jet wings that are on the sonar images.
It was
we knew right away.
Wrong.
Sure. And so the media was like, oh, Amelia Earhart's plane found. But then a few months ago or a month ago, when they were like, oh, actually it's a rock formation on the floor, on the surface of the floor of the ocean. That didn't get millions of views. And I guarantee you when I have an article come out very soon with the FBI agent, Larry Carr, flat out saying this is a hoax, that will not get the media coverage that his lie got, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's really a shame. But the good news is nobody cares enough about DB Cooper to really, the ones who care about Cooper know that this is bogus. And, Dan hasn't convinced anybody who knows anything. Now, look, the McCoy kids are good people. Look, I've talked to both of them. They're not actually, I've messaged them on Facebook. They're good people. And if they believe their dad was Cooper, that's fine. But, you know, I still tell them, look, you can still believe your dad's DB Cooper, but that ain't his parachute. Okay. Because we know what parachutes Cooper had, and your dad, nobody's lumping this parachute out of the forest with them.
Yeah.
You know, it just
For what? For a memento? I need that memento. I've got the money. I've got something. Why do you need? It's a memento. The government.
No, it's stupid.
Supplied parachute.
Hey, okay, so Drew, I'm showing the picture of the parachute that you sent me. Can you
Yeah, that's
talk to?
similar. That's similar to the one that Cooper jumped with that I sent you. But
So,
it wasn't from Gryder, so I was, careful where I got pictures from to make
yeah.
sure that, we were good.
So this is more like what DB Cooper
Yes, I think
thinks.
that's it. Can you see that, Ryan? I think that's an NB bailout rig. So that's a
Yeah.
little. That's more what DB Cooper's parachute looked like.
I mean, I have the one. I mean, in
Or
fact,
similar to the one behind Ryan. He could show
I can
you.
do a
'cause
I can
he
do a
owns
live
that.
demonstration. Watch this. Here, we'll
Yeah,
try
watch this because he's got one. It's even better, and I got to put that on at CooperCon. It's a lot of fun.
All right, let's see.
He owns it, so you don't have to worry about any copyright stuff here.
Okay.
Okay.
I
All right,
will
let's look
attest
at
that he
this.
owns this.
So let's look at this. So on a Navy parachute, when you hook a parachute across your chest, okay, let's see. When you hook one of these across your chest, it has, let me find my slide here. Where is it? Okay, this. So this thing is what you hook up. Where's my chest harness? There we go. All right. Sorry, folks. This is live stuff. Okay, so these chest harnesses, this is what you clip right here. Okay, you clip it right there. All right. The clip slides up and down on this harness. It slides up and down, okay? The clip this is what makes it a Navy parachute. All right, slides up and down the clip. An Air Force parachute, okay? I have one right here. The clip on an Air Force parachute is stationary. Has this webbing.
Yeah, it's fixed.
It's fixed. It doesn't slide up and down. Okay. So
and that's what Gryder found.
That's what Gryder found. He found a Chevy working for a Ford. Okay.
Right.
They're completely different things.
And the files reflect that we know what Cooper jumped with. And we have the chute that he didn't jump with at the museum.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we know what Cooper had. Cooper, well, here's a good example too. So let me show you all this. One thing that that Dan Gryder's parachute has, where are the Cape Wells? Okay. Dan Gryder's parachute that he found has these things right here. These are called Cape Wells, these metal pieces. If you grab these, it's like if you're hung up in a tree or something, you can pop these like this. They pop open and the thing just comes off your back. Okay. They're just quick release if you're stuck somewhere. Okay. They're like for skydivers or whoever, but especially for skydivers. Military parachutes generally don't have those. So Cooper's parachute didn't have any of these things. So if I'm wearing this and I'm stuck in a tree, there's no quick release pops for me to undo. Okay. Those are called Cape Wells. So the guy who the FBI, the guy who made the parachutes that Cooper jumped with was a guy named Earl Cossey. So he lived in Seattle. Okay. So what they would do, the FBI, every time for 30 years, 40 years, whenever somebody found a parachute, they'd bring it to the FBI office. They'd call Earl Cossey. They'd say, hey, we come down to the FBI office, look at this parachute. And Earl Cossey would almost always say, no, that can't be the parachute because it's an Air Force parachute. Or he'd say, it's got these D rings on it that Cooper's thing couldn't clip to. Or he says, Cooper's parachute didn't have Cape Wells. That parachute has Cape Wells, which are those quick release things. Cooper's parachute that I made, that the guy jumped with, didn't have these. Well, Dan Gryder's parachute has those mechanisms. Okay.
Yeah.
So
multiple things wrong with it.
It's not only an Air Force thing. We're looking for a Navy parachute. It's got these D-rings that aren't on this. It's got the quick release things that aren't on this. This is an exact replica of Cooper's parachute. There are no quick release mechanisms. This is a Navy parachute with no quick release mechanisms. There's no D-rings on this thing. In fact, Cooper, let me show you another prop, okay?
That's the
This is a reserve parachute, okay? This is what DB Cooper was also given. Remember, he asked for 2 back parachutes, which are those big, heavy things. And he also asked for 2 front chutes, which are these. This is a reserve parachute. So if you're jumping and your main parachute doesn't open, you can just open this one, okay?
Yeah.
And this attaches to your chest, okay, with these clips. Has these clips here, these little metal things.
The D-rings.
Okay, the D-rings on your backpack, this thing clips onto
Hold it
you.
in place.
Okay, well, Cooper's didn't have any D-rings to clip this on, so this was useless to DB Cooper.
Both of them useless.
And so when Tina, the stewardess, brings those parachutes on board, Cooper looks up at her and says, "Hey, where's my D-rings?" Like, he goes, "They should have known I needed D-rings because I can't use these reserves."
Yeah.
And Tina just kind of shrugs, and she doesn't know skydiving stuff, right? So, but he doesn't bitch about it after that. But yeah, so fun little demonstration for your audience there. But whole point is not Cooper's parachute. Okay, so yes, big differences.
Not even close.
Okay, everybody, they want to see. Packer said that you have a Mini Cooper.
Yeah, where's Mini Coop, dude? I just thought about Mini Cooper. I'm like, I just thought of that myself. Thank you, Packer. Where the heck is Mini Coop, dude? Mini Coop is like so popular. Everybody at CooperCon love Mini Coop.
So this is custom. I had to custom make this thing. This is Mini Cooper.
All right, hold on, let me enlarge that. Hold on.
And the money bag, I love it.
Yeah. So
I'm enlarging that.
Yeah, here he is. So this is my guy here.
Yeah, you can't buy that at Walmart, folks. That's custom.
No, I had to make this. So Cooper jumps. So Cooper's actually, people think he's wearing black. Cooper's trench coat was black, but his actual suit was brown with thin black stripes. So maybe you can see it, but he's wearing a brown suit with a black raincoat, trench coat. We're not quite sure. Okay, so his suit's brown. His shoes were brown. Remember, ankle high little booties. So my little Cooper toy action figure, my daughter would probably call it a doll, but I don't play with dolls, by the way. I play with action figures. I'm a grown-up who plays with action figures. But anyway, and Cooper, interestingly enough, when he jumped out, the money was brought in you can see it behind me. The money was brought to him in a canvas bank bag. Okay, let me get that as a prop.
Yeah, get the bag. Yeah, I got to play with that at the convention.
It's heavy. So
you can tell Ryan's into it.
Yeah, this actually has 10,000. I had to cut 10,000 pieces of paper, dollar-sized pieces of paper, which is what he had. He had 10,000 $20 bills. It's heavy. It's the same exact weight, pretty much. So they gave it to him in this canvas Seattle First bank bag, and one of the passengers said it looked like a pillowcase with bricks in it that the stewardess is dragging down the aisle. Well, Cooper's like, what am I supposed to do with this? Because he asked for it in a knapsack. He says, well, I wanted a knapsack. Okay. Well, Cooper opens, remember we talked about how Cooper couldn't wear those chest parachutes because he had no D-rings. So he just opens one of those parachutes and he cuts shroud lines. Those are if you see a guy on a parachute who's like, oh, those are the lines that go up to the big canopy. Cooper cuts about 100 feet. He pulls out a pocket knife. This guy knows parachutes. He opens a parachute. I wouldn't have thought to have done that, but he opens a parachute, pulls out a knife, cuts about 100 feet of shroud line, and wraps this thing up just like this. He wraps it over
That's actual
the top.
paracord, right? That's the actual paracord.
This is paracord, yep. And then he makes the stewardess says he made a little loop, like a handle like this at the top. Then he tied this. This is bizarre. This kind of shows some strangeness, but he tied that to another length of line that he wrapped around his waist. So she said that when Cooper is walking down the aisle, he's dragging a bag behind him.
Like the one you just
Okay.
showed, yeah, big heavy bag.
Yeah, just like this. He's dragging the big money bag.
Really?
Now what that is military people, paratroopers, special forces, what they do to keep some weight off of them when they jump is they will attach a bag to their leg usually, or to their like chest. Okay. And what they do is when they jump, as they're coming down in their parachute, they'll pull something and this thing will drop. And this thing hits the ground first and then they come down. So it's like they're landing with less weight. And it also at nighttime, if it's on a line, like a 20-foot line, it hits the ground first. So you know where the ground is. Okay. So it's kind of a military way of jumping at night with weight. So the stewardess says the last time she saw Cooper, he actually waved goodbye to her, but the last time she sees him, he's walking down the aisle, dragging this bag behind him. And now at some point he had 30 minutes back there by himself. So at some point in that 30 minutes, he probably, tied it, he rigged it to himself somehow and then jumps out. So we actually don't know how Cooper looked when he jumped. He probably didn't look like this because he had a mystery bag with him. We call this, Cooper had a briefcase that had the bomb in it, but he also had a bag that was described as being about the same width as the briefcase and about 4 inches tall. Okay. Something was in that, but whatever it was never used in the actual like hijacking portion of the hijacking. Cause no one saw, he didn't just emerge with some boots or anything. So nobody saw what was in the bag. The stewardess, the bag was still unopened essentially when she went to the front, when he sent her away. So whatever was in the bag was used for his escape or for his jump. We have no idea what was in the bag. Could have been boots, goggles, beanie, a compass, altimeter, a walkie-talkie, who knows? So we actually don't know what Cooper looked like when he jumped. We just think he looks like this because that's what he looked like the last time she saw him. But remember, he had this whole bag with him that she didn't know what was inside of it. So, and we know from copycats like McCoy had a goodie bag with him. The guy we know, Marty McNally, who's a friend of ours, who was a copycat, spent 38 years in prison. He had a mystery bag. We can ask these guys, hey, what was in your mystery bag? Well, some of them had a canteen. Some of them had compasses, a pistol hidden, a gun hidden in there, tape. I think I think McCoy may have taped his ankles or something. They had all kind of rope. McCoy had like a 20-foot line of rope. Don't tell anybody, but actually, allegedly, don't tell the McCoy people this. Hopefully they've turned it off. It got
They hate us. But McCoy people hate our guts.
Don't tell them this.
I feel sorry for your mods.
But if you read the McCoy files, McCoy also had a drag bag. So McCoy had the same thing. Now this was not known to the public that Cooper did this. We didn't know this until recently even. So McCoy also had the drag bag. 1 point for Team McCoy. Yeah, a point for Team 1. Well, hooray for them. They get 1 point against a million.
It's over.
Do you want one McDonald's dollar or a million McDonald's dollars?
Yeah.
I'll take the million. But all that really shows is that Cooper had military training the same way that McCoy had military training probably. And so did all these guys. In fact, when you look at all the copycats who jumped out, there were 6 people did this. Cooper, then 5 other guys. All of them, to a man, had been in the military. I mean, all of them had been in aviation military somehow. Some chopper pilots, bomber crewmen, air crewmen, things like this. Paratroopers, they had all been aviation related military. So when we're looking at Cooper, we can probably look at the copycats for at least an analog to him. And because he had the same skill set they had. But he was older than they were though. Most of the copycats were young guys. He was an older guy.
Were all these
McCoy.
Were all these skyjackings done in the evening or in the day, in daylight?
Good question.
Only one of them all of them were done at night. Only one, except one, there was a guy named Richard LaPointe who, if anybody wants to go to my website, norjak.org, NORJAK.org, You go to copycat section, you'll see a picture of this guy. He looks just like McConaughey in Dazed and Confused. All right, all right, all right. He looks just
All
like
right,
the
all
guy.
right.
He's in handcuffs, smiling.
Yeah. I know
was-
that picture. It's great.
Yeah, he was a chopper. He was a door gunner on a chopper in Vietnam, came back with terrible PTSD. This poor guy, and he was 21 years old. He became a Cooper fanboy. He jumps out in January of 7. He hijacks a plane in Vegas, jumps out in broad daylight over northern Colorado, lands in the snow with cowboy boots and a Western style shirt on, just whatever, and breaks his ankle.
Oh,
Poor guy. And he gets caught very quickly because he's in broad daylight coming down in a parachute. Right? Everybody sees him. Well, they haul him in front of a judge. And this is kind of sad, really. They haul this guy in front of a judge and they're like, son, we're going to get you treatment for your leg. You'll get free treatment for your leg. And he goes, can I have some mental treatment, please? Like, because he's like, my brain, because he's talked about at his trial that he had visions because he was a door gunner on a Huey in Vietnam, that he cut a guy in half. He said, I had this vision of when I killed this guy one time and I sawed him literally in 2 pieces. And so he said, I could never get that vision out of my head of doing this to somebody. And so he just had major PTSD. One of the other guys who did this, a guy named Rob Hetty, had actually been the NCAA champion skydiver in like 1968, which I guess they had intramural NCAA skydiving champions. Who knew? Yeah, who knew? But he was the NCAA skydiving champion, bright kid, gets drafted, goes in as a paratrooper in the 101st Airborne in Vietnam, gets really messed up. He's back 2 weeks and runs onto a plane. He doesn't even buy a ticket for a plane. He jumps a gate at the Reno airport and just runs onto a plane with a hood on and pulls out a pistol and starts firing it. And it was a wild thing. But he's a smart guy. He became an accountant in prison. And all the tragedy of McCoy, for anybody who's watching, is that all these copycats, except for our friend McNally, but all these copycats were Vietnam guys, and all of them were released. If you remember, Jimmy Carter had a lot of like clemency on the draft dodgers and other things. He did a lot of forgiveness for Vietnam stuff, and that included veterans who had committed acts of malfeasance because of their trauma, right? So all these guys, all these skyjackers were let out within 5 years of doing it, 6 years. They didn't spend that long. And so McCoy, the tragedy of McCoy is he wanted to get home to his kids so bad that he broke out of prison and got killed for it. If he had just waited for 5 years, he would have got out too, especially him being as highly decorated as he was. So all these guys got out. Rob Hetty is still the guy that was the champion skydiver who did this same crime. He still has an accounting firm in, I think Yuma, Arizona, I think now. So like he's like 79 or so, but like, the tragedy of McCoy is he would have got out and he didn't need to be killed by the FBI. And really it was suicide by cop too. If you really look at the actual events of his escape, he told his buddy who he escaped with, his buddy was actually Melvin Walker was the guy's name. He was actually on the FBI's top 10 most wanted before the escape. This guy was a real bad cookie, Melvin Walker. And so they escaped together and he tells Melvin Walker, look, if we're ever in a tight spot, I'm just going to raise my gun and they're going to kill me. And Melvin's like, well, I'm just going to put my hands up. I don't want to die. But McCoy's like, no, I don't want to run anymore. I'm not going to prison anymore. I'm going to get killed. And he walks in his house one day and the FBI are waiting for him. And he just raises his pistol and they shoot him with a shotgun. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he wasn't going to kill. I don't think he was going to shoot the FBI. He didn't. Yeah. I mean, he didn't fire a shot at them. He just raised his gun and they shot him because he knew that they were going to kill him. So, interestingly enough, the accomplice, Melvin Walker, who, remember, this guy was FBI's top 10 most wanted. He busts out with Richard McCoy, escapes. Now, remember I mentioned how the guy that we're friends with, McNally, this other guy who came to CooperCon, he spent 38 years in prison. He didn't get out early because he kept trying to escape. They frown on you trying to escape from federal prison, okay? Well, Melvin Walker gets out with McCoy, okay? This guy's top 10 FBI's most wanted. With McCoy, they're out. They commit bank robberies, kidnappings, car theft. He's caught down the road from McCoy. McCoy gets gunned down. Melvin Walker's literally down the street in a car being pulled over by the FBI. He's out of prison within 7 years. Okay. He's out of federal prison in 7 years. So that was just impossible if you're already
Yeah.
FBI's most wanted and you break out and you,
Yeah,
you know, like
he
I said,
gets
our
out.
buddy Max, a good guy. He spent 38 years because he tried a prison escape. Okay. Melvin Walker almost certainly ratted on McCoy to the FBI. I mean, there's
Get a
no
better
other
deal.
explanation. Like as a prosecutor myself, that's how it works essentially is the thought, we can't prove this, but it makes perfect sense that Melvin Walker called the FBI. He was tired of running. They had spent like 4 months on the run. He was tired of being chased, called the FBI, said, look, I'll give you McCoy. I'll give up myself. This won't be an embarrassment for you guys because it was a national manhunt. If you don't kill me, I'll let you know where McCoy is. And, you know, he got a deal. So he was out in 7 years. So McCoy had his sister-in-law rat on him, and then he had his accomplice rat on him, I guess, when they escaped, and that's what got him killed. So McCoy should have chosen better associates, I guess. But
Yeah.
it's a tragic story.
Don't you think there's somebody out there that knows who D.B. Cooper is? He had to have been in contact with somebody. You just don't fall out of a plane and you disappear. There had to be somebody that helped him. There had to have been.
Maybe. I mean, there that possibly that's why we don't know who Cooper is, because he didn't tell anybody. I mean, that's might be why that he's so special, is because he just didn't say anything to anybody. In fact, there's a good analog. If you recall, a couple of years ago, a guy died, and when he died, before he died, he admitted to his family that he had robbed a bank. He had robbed his employer. It was in like Maine or somewhere, Massachusetts maybe. He was like 25. He was a bank teller, and he robbed his own bank in like 1970 of like $500,000 and just walked out with it and started a new life, became like a dentist or something. And I forget what the people in your comments might know the story, but that's I'm sure they might bring it up. But yeah, he told his family, hey, look, my real on his deathbed said my real name is such and such. I robbed the place I worked. And so, I mean, he never told anybody until he died. And Cooper, my thought on Cooper really is that most of these skyjackers either had PTSD really badly, or they were real suicidal types, or like none of them were just balanced individuals. Like, I mean, really none of them. And the only one I know of is our friend Martin McNally, who, oddly enough, the guy who spent 38 years and came to CooperCon, McNally, he was casing a Brinks truck. He was following a Brinks truck, like learning its route to go rob it, when he heard on the radio about DB Cooper. And he goes, ooh, that's a better idea for a score than robbing this Brinks truck. I'll go try that. So Mac was a criminal. We call him Mac. Mac was already a felon. And I made sure at CooperCon last year when I interviewed him in front of the audience, I said, Mac, were you a felon before you committed this hijacking? He goes, oh, yes. I already had a burglary or whatever, you know. So Mac is really the only one of all the copycats. Funnily enough, I've studied the copycats. I'd love to write a book on them. He's the only one who's calm, is McNally. And because he's a criminal, he's used to robbing people. Okay. All the other guys were like nervous and fidgety and just
like McCoy,
and all these other guys. But so my thought is that, the reason why Ted Braden, who is Drew Beeson's suspect here, is a good guy, is a good suspect. And the reason why I emailed him all those years ago, I just emailed him out of the blue. I'd never talked to him before. I said, hey man, I'm a prosecutor. I think this guy looks good, because he's an actual criminal. Braden was I think there's a quote. What is the quote? He was the perfect combination of intelligence and criminality.
High intelligence and criminality. Yeah. His sister-in-law said that about him. Yeah.
Yeah. This guy was a real criminal. He was always committing thefts, always looking for stealing things from people. So Braden would have been calm, because Braden used to jump into North Vietnam, with three other guys at night. I mean,
in Laos,
dangerous in Laos, dangerous stuff, right? CIA sort of stuff. He was a brave guy, but he also didn't seem to have a problem inconveniencing other people for his own profit, and not at all. And so Cooper, in my estimation, was somebody who was a criminal, who had military background, aviation background, I think, of some sort. It's funny, and people ask me that all the time. I get emails from people who are from the media or whatever, like, who do you think Cooper was? And I'm like, I actually don't know. I have to think about it, because I have no, but I just don't think this was his first crime, because people don't, but I mean, imagine yourself hijacking a plane tomorrow. You'd be nervous. I mean, you'd be terrified. But Cooper's calm as he can be. He's noted as slouching in his seat, smoking a cigarette. He's playing dad jokes to the stewardess. He tells one of the stewardesses, he says, hey, one of the stewardesses, Florence Schaffner, she was small. She was half Filipino. Her dad was an army guy from World War II and married a Filipino girl and brought her back. So Florence Schaffner's Filipino. She's little. And he picks up the bag and he makes her pick it up. He goes, hey, pick up this bag. Isn't it heavy? And she's like, oh, yeah, this bag's really heavy. Okay, ha ha. So he's like, Cooper's back there like joking around with these girls. He's not nervous at all, or didn't appear to be. I mean, I think he probably was a little bit, but he was as cool as he was as cool as he could be. Relaxed, described as relaxed. Tina Mucklow, the stewardess who sat with him for 5 hours, her famous quote to the media was, he was never cruel or nasty or impolite to me in any way. She said he was impatient a few times, but other than that, he was a guy. McCoy is cussing, sweating, pointing pistols at people. The guy who ran on the plane, Rob Hetty, the champion skydiver, he's firing .357 Magnum bullets into like the plane on the ground, which is really loud. Another guy named Bill Heineman, who jumped out of a plane with money. He's like putting pistols to people's guts. Guy. He puts a noose around the pilot's neck. I mean,
oh my God.
Yeah, it's
violent,
ugly, violent. Hijacking is a violent sport.
Crime. Yeah. It's
the only two hijackers that I know of who didn't get who weren't visibly like disturbed and like shouting and are McNally, our buddy, who's back there just smoking cigarettes.
Who has a better story too.
Has a better story too, and Cooper is calm. So I don't think this was Cooper's first crime. I think it showed, I think it was McCoy's first crime, and it showed by how nervous he was and how bad he was at it, really. Leaving fingerprints, just talking, running his mouth too much. I think that a criminal knows not to talk too much. I think a real criminal knows that the way you get caught. In fact, if you talk to Larry Carr, the FBI agent who had this case, he did bank robberies. He said they used to have 2 or 3 a day in Seattle, bank robberies. I didn't realize that, but he said they would have 300 a year usually. And he says that almost every single bank robbery in his experience of 20 years with the FBI, almost all of them are solved by people talking. People just run their mouths, essentially. Somebody talk.
Bragging or...
bragging. He said if they would just shut up, we probably wouldn't catch hardly any of these people. If they just didn't talk, if somebody didn't know. So quite possible that Cooper didn't have any friends either. I mean, again, he's antisocial. That's antisocial behavior. In fact, I asked the sister of our friend Mac, the other calm skyjacker, I asked her, she came with him to CooperCon. She was a teenager at the time. And McNally was about 25. I said, hey, if he had gone missing, he was captured within a week of his skyjacking. But I asked his sister, I said, hey, if he went missing back then, would your family have cared? Would your family have put out a missing persons report? And she goes, no. He was a black sheep of the family. He was a felon. He was kind of already ostracized from the family. His family became he had a huge family, big Catholic family of like 8 kids from Detroit. They became doctors and lawyers. Then there's McNally, who had some PTSD himself. And McNally was on a plane crew of 10 guys during the Vietnam era. And one day he had, I think, diarrhea or something, and his plane crashed and all of his buddies were killed. He should have died that day. And so he still has a lot of PTSD. He says he wakes up sweating still, but he came back and was all messed up. But the family had ostracized him already. So I asked her, I said, would y'all have cared if you hadn't heard from Marty for years? She goes, no. So, Cooper was probably like that. Cooper had worn out his welcome, probably. from his family. And that's why if he had died, that's why there's no missing persons report. Or if he went to Mexico with the money, there's no missing persons report filed because, no one cares. I mean, I have an uncle that we didn't know if he was alive or dead for decades. He had no kids, no wife, and he was a pilot, incidentally enough. And but he's a grown man. We're not going to go file a missing persons report for a grown man, especially back then. Think about the 70s, how many men would go out for a pack of smokes and don't come back, that sort of thing. That was common and if the wife went to the police, oh, my husband went missing, whatever.
Yeah,
Ma'am, he's a grown man. He can do what he wants to do. Yeah, he can do what he wants. He's a grown man, So Cooper, he probably didn't have any friends. My thought.
The airline stewardess, is she still alive?
All of them are, yeah.
Oh, they all are?
3 of them. There are 3
all
of them.
Stewardesses.
Okay.
There were 3 of them.
Okay, so 3 of them. Have they shown these stewardesses any pictures?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's how I know McCoy's not Cooper. Oh, Braden. Oh, maybe.
Well, I'm pretty sure one of them has, yes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look,
people about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, they keep up with it. They may not admit it, but one of the stewardesses I know has seen one of my videos and thought it was really funny. I made a funny video of where I made fun of D.B. Cooper movies. I know for a fact that one of the stewardesses saw it and thought it was really funny. And so they don't talk much, but they're out there, and I've never spoken to any of them. I'd love to, though. I've tried, but they just don't talk much. But no, they've seen photographs.
Coming out.
But here's the problem, though, Norene, is that we have the FBI files now, and when we look at the FBI files, we can see what they used to do is they used to take a whole bunch of photographs of suspects to these girls in 72, 71 and say, hey, now remember, half of the photos are going to be control photos. So they're just random photos of guys just for control purposes, but they would lay out all these photos. Do any of these guys look like Cooper? Does this guy look like Cooper? Him? And they would say, no. And we have a document in 1973, Tina Mucklow, the one who sat with Cooper for 5 hours. We have her admitting, saying, look, you need to stop showing me photographs because I don't remember what he looks like anymore. It's gone. My memory of him is gone. And she said, I've seen the sketch. I've seen that sketch so many times. She goes, I think I'm starting to see the sketch.
Like Bill said, same thing.
Than the real memory. And Bill Mitchell, who Drew just said, Bill Mitchell was the college kid who sat across from Cooper for 4 hours or 3 hours. He said the same thing. He said, I had seen that sketch so many times.
Now in my mind. Yeah.
I'm seeing the sketch as Cooper. So 73 is when Tina says, I can't remember. And then 1976 is when the stewardess who actually got the best look at him. Tina actually, if we read the FBI documents, she says that she never looked at him directly because she didn't want to antagonize him, which is what you're supposed to do in a robbery. You don't look at the bank robber, just to keep your head down. She said that she was sitting next to him, lighting his cigarettes, but she never straight up looked at him. She said she was looking down, never tried not to antagonize him. Well, so the best witness, actually, the FBI considered the best eyewitness to be the stewardess who took his ticket. Her name was Florence Schaffner. She took his ticket. She made his bourbon and 7-Up for him. She brought his change back. He's the one who they even had a staring contest when Cooper hands her the note. This is the Filipino girl.
Yeah.
He hands her the hijacking note. It's in an envelope, and she just puts it in her bag. She thinks he's hitting on her, that it's his phone number or something.
Yeah.
So she just goes, thank you, and she puts it in her pocket. And she goes and straps up and sits down right behind him in the jump seat to take off. And he turns around and keeps looking at her. And she tells the paper the next day or 2 days later, she goes, he kept looking at me and I looked back at him. And then I kept looking at him and he kept looking at me. And they had this staring contest. And finally she goes, what do you want? And he says, Miss, I think you need to read that note. And she goes, okay, fine. And she goes, oh my God, it says, Miss, and the note said, Miss, I have a bomb. I would like for you to sit next to me. And she sits next to him. Now remember, he has no sunglasses at this point. This is an important distinction. His sunglasses aren't on at this point. So he's staring right at her. Okay. They have a staring contest. Then she sits next to him and she says in her FBI interview, 15 minutes after getting off the plane, I looked directly at him and said, is this a joke? He goes, no, ma'am, this is not a joke. This will kill us. All I have to do, she says, he was looking right at her and said, all I have to do is connect these 2 wires and we'll all be dead.
Oh my
So he left a real intimidating, he was looking right at her. And at some point during that conversation, he put on his sunglasses. So he didn't put on his sunglasses until he became the hijacker. Okay. So she had multiple interactions with this guy before she was afraid of him. Right. And so if you understand psychology of eyewitnesses, if they're scared of you, their memory is going to be different. It's distorted because they're fearing their life. It's like people will say, you know, people had a gun pulled on them. It's the biggest gun ever they ever saw. It turns out it's a little pocket pistol.
Yeah.
You know, people they're scared. So she interacted with him before he became the hijacker, but when he was just another passenger. And so her memory is considered the best. She admits in 76, hey, stop showing me photographs. I don't remember what it looks like. So any Braden or any Skip Hall, any of these modern suspects, you know, Bill Mitchell, the college kid who sat across from Cooper, and you'll like this, Noreen, the college kid, he was a college student. The only reason he cared about DB Cooper, he sat across the aisle from Cooper. It was him in the middle seat on the back row on the left-hand side. Then there was Cooper in the middle seat on the right-hand side of the back row. So there's just them two. He first notices Cooper because Cooper spills his bourbon and 7-Up, which is kind of a funny detail. He spills his drink and he says, I first noticed, I was like, who's this dork? And then he says he couldn't figure out why. Now, Bill's a strapping 6'2", 20-year-old, University of Oregon, played football in high school, you know, and why this cute stewardess girl is spending hours with this, quote, geeky old guy. So he was like, he couldn't figure it out because remember, he didn't know they were being hijacked. So he's just staring at this. He said he was picking on Cooper.
Yeah, looking to pick him apart.
He was like,
God.
He said he was picking on him like, he studied him because he was like, what is this dork?
Oh my
he
God.
Said, Cooper,
yeah, I'm an ICU college student. This guy's an old
he
geek.
said, what? He was jealous of the attention this girl was getting. So he just kind of, he was mean.
He's
as
trying
the
to
kids
find
would
things
call
wrong
it.
with him.
Yeah. As my daughter would say, he was mean mugging Cooper. You know, he was looking at him for hours. And one of the things he picked up on, he's the only passenger who noticed this. He said, Cooper, and I've got one right here. He said, Cooper had loose skin. You know, he had like a turkey wobble. Now, he's the only witness who says this about Cooper because he's the only witness who has that angle, who has a side profile angle from a distance, right?
It was calm.
Oh, so that's an older man. That's an older man.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And McCoy didn't have that.
No, that's another thing about McCoy. McCoy had a sharp chin. He called it a turkey gobble, a turkey wobble. But yeah, he noticed this. He kept saying that the sketch needs to have a turkey neck.
So how many people? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine.
How many people were involved in the sketch that the FBI had drawn?
9 witnesses were used. So there were 10 eyewitnesses. Well, essentially 10 eyewitnesses were able to give a basic, a description enough. Okay. It'd be the guy who he sold the ticket, the guy who sold him the ticket, the guy who took the ticket, the gate agent remembered him, 3 stewardesses and 7 passengers saw him, but 5 remembered enough. Really our main witnesses though, are of course the 3 stewardesses who actually, all 3 of them talked to Cooper at different times. They're back there hanging out with him, which is weird. After they land and the passengers are let off, they go back there shooting the bull with Cooper for a little while. And it kind of is interesting to me, psychologically, this guy allegedly has a dynamite bomb and they're back there just like talking to him, which indicates to me that they weren't really afraid of him. I think and some people, a psychologist told me this, who was in our office here. I was telling the story about all this because I think that those girls, another knock on him being McCoy's age or being in his 20s or whatever, is they were not afraid of him sexually, essentially. They weren't afraid of being assaulted. He was the dad age to them. Like they didn't view him as a threat
father figure
that way because he was kind of he was their dad's age. You know, these girls are 21, 22 years old. He's mid 40s, maybe even older. The FBI's approximate age is 48. Is what they have for him. So he's older. But they weren't afraid of him. They weren't afraid of being assaulted by him. It didn't seem like.
Wait a minute. They're saying this guy, that the DB Cooper was 48?
Yeah, that's the
No,
FBI's approximate age.
Yeah, approximate
way.
age.
There's no way.
No way what? That he was that old?
No, that he was that young. There's no way. At 48
He
years
was
old.
48?
Hell no. You don't get the damn chin until you start getting older.
I've got it.
Yeah, but not the way they described it. This guy had to have been older than that.
Yeah, well, yeah, the way exactly. I think the way that he's describing it is that like loose skin that you get like from when you're like 50 or something,
or they think he weighed more and lost weight. Somebody, I've heard that.
Yeah. Bill described it as being flabby skin. He says it's almost like somebody had lost a bunch of weight recently or something, is the way he described it to the FBI.
Well, then why didn't they put that on the sketch? Why didn't they do that?
I don't know. In fact, I don't know why they didn't do this. We have in the FBI files, they're like, hey, we should do a side profile sketch because we don't know how long his nose is either. He's got a little nose. If you look at the Cooper sketch behind me, he has this really weird little nose.
Yeah, it's skinny like in through here. Yeah.
Yeah, and the sketch artist did not invent that nose. The stewardesses told him to draw that nose. So that's the nose he's got. So point is, we don't know how long it is though, because there's no side profile sketch. And we actually have Bill Mitchell told me this, and I wanted to punch a hole in the wall. Bill's the college kid. He told me this 2 weeks ago. He says, I made my own side profile sketch and I gave it to the FBI. And I'm like,
you're like, what?
And like, I've never seen that in the files. And
where is it?
I was like, did they give it back to you? He goes, no.
Oh,
so
man.
Maybe we'll see it. Look, I mean, they still
have
45
kept a lot of his stuff.
Yeah. His mom kept a lot of memory. But the funny part, Norene, is Bill brought some stuff and I scanned them all high resolution stuff. Bill's mom,
ticket, by the way,
he still has his ticket. Yeah. Bill's mom wrote Northwest Airlines a letter. She said, hey, thank you for taking care of my son. He's the baby boy. She wrote this nice letter to Northwest Airlines saying, oh, my son was on the hijacked plane, yada, yada. And they wrote a letter back and it's great. Bill brought this Northwest Airlines letter. It says, it was clearly a boilerplate response. It says, we are so happy that you enjoyed your flight on Flight 305 on November 24th, 71. We look forward to serving you in the future. It's like, oh, wait, you didn't even know what I was referring to.
It was hijacked.
It's like, we are so happy that you enjoyed your flight. It's like, okay.
You're hijacking. You're hijacking.
Yeah, you're hijacking.
You're hijacking.
Bill tells a funny story too, that he said that he had a Spanish class that semester. Okay. And his final exam for Spanish was they had to write a 5-paragraph essay in Spanish. And he wrote his hijacking story in Spanish, okay, for his exam a few weeks later. And his Spanish teacher's like, hey, no, stop. Like, just tell us, in English, this story. Because it's interesting. Because he was like reading it in front of the class. And they're like, in his terrible Spanish, right? This essay for a Spanish class, and the teacher goes, no, stop. We all want to hear you tell it in English, please. So he said I got an A, but he told it in English. So, but the thing about Cooper is we can joke about Cooper a little bit because it's a bloodless crime, to a degree. But he had many children. What I mean by that is there were copycats who were killed. There were passengers who were killed in copycat attempts. McCoy went to prison and busted out and got killed himself. As of this, my friend what's funny is Bill Mitchell, again, the college kid, he was on stage last year at CooperCon with McNally, who was there, the other skyjacker, and they became buddies. They were talking, having beers together. It was really interesting. He was almost like meeting a DB Cooper in a way after all these years. He was really interesting, dynamic. But Bill's on stage talking about the victims. He's like, there were victims of the hijacking. My mom was terrified. I've thought about it over the years. He says, now I'm a grandfather. I'm like, you know what? If that had been a real bomb and had gone off, my kids never would have existed. My grandkids never would have existed. This guy could have killed me. There were victims. And he looked at Mac and goes, Mac spent 38 years in prison because of Cooper. And Mac, being Mac, goes, well, if it wasn't that, it would have been something else. So
oh man,
joking about, he's like, I would have wound up in prison somehow anyway. So, but there were victims McCoy was a victim. I mean, I don't,
Oh, terrible
you know,
victim, terrible tragedies. This was so
and his
interesting.
kids grew up without their
It's so
dad
sad. It's
be-
sad. It's
be- because of Cooper. So interesting stuff.
Sissy, hold on. There's a question for you. Well, Renee McDowell, she wants to know, uh, how did some of the money get at the area that the kid found, and did the bag break?
it's Ryan's favorite thing to talk about. No kidding.
No habla inglés. I always say no habla inglés.
No, he's
whenever
changing.
someone
Ryan's,
asks me that.
Ryan's changing his mind a little on the Tina Bar money
Yeah.
arrival.
Okay,
Neat to
so
me.
yeah, it's okay. So Tina Bar. Okay, so the money was found. It was actually $6,000. They actually determined it was 6,000, not 5,800. They actually found some later fragments, but anyway, Brian Ingram, a 8-year-old boy, he's building a fire pit on this sandbar where they're going for a fish fry with his dad and his family, and he just unearths 3 $2,000 packets with crummy rubber bands right under the surface. Okay. Now, that money had been in there for a long time. It was degraded, torn up. It had been in the sand. It had been buried for years and years and years. Okay. The question is, how did it get there? Because Cooper jumps out about 10 miles away. The flight never goes anywhere near this spot. Okay. So it'd be like if you were, your car keys were stolen from the interstate and your car somehow it ends up 10 miles away. You're like, how'd that happen?
Plane didn't fly over that area.
The plane didn't fly anywhere near there. Okay. So the natural thought is, well, if it's found on a sandbar, it must have washed up from the river. This is because the Columbia River's right there. It's a half-mile wide river, one of the biggest rivers in America. Okay. They must have washed up. That's what the natural thought would be. But there has been scientific testing done on this money. And in the river, there are species of what's called diatoms. They're microscopic organisms. Now, there are species that only live in the springtime, and there are species that only live in the wintertime. Okay, that money was waterlogged at some point. It did get wet, but the testing showed it only got wet in the spring. Now, Cooper jumps in November, so like the money didn't go in the river in November. It only got wet in the spring. Okay, now that's interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
But now we have hydrologists who are part of the vortex now, and they're saying there is no way that money washes up on a beach and then is covered in 3 feet of sand. Because what happened was they're pretty sure that money just naturally eroded. That sandbar has about a 6-inch erosion rate every year. Okay. So the money, if it was buried 3 feet deep, eventually would have eroded to the top. Okay. So it had been buried for a while because of its degraded age, so it didn't, and it wasn't pushed there by a flood. Okay. Because money there are Cooper nerds who have gone to the bank and gotten 300
experiments.
We've done experiments because the money that was found was $320 bills. A guy went to the bank and got $300 bills and packaged them the exact same way, threw them in his bathtub, and they get waterlogged and they sink. So money bundles are not going to float. They can't float down a river or anything. They just sink to the bottom. Mm-hmm. So it really seems like someone put that there. I didn't used to think that.
You didn't at all. I'll state that for the record.
Yeah, I did not. I was like, of course, that's so preposterous. Why would anybody bury money on a beach? But I will always go with the evidence. Okay, I'm not a dogmatic person. I like facts. And if there are scientists who are like, this did not get there naturally, it cannot, then I'll believe them. And so how it got there, I don't think Cooper knows. I bet Cooper wouldn't know how it got there. Perhaps I think maybe he hitchhiked a ride from somebody, and as he got out of the car, he threw them a money bundle or something and said, "Thanks for the ride, kid." And the next day the kid's like, "Oh my God, this is the hijacking money," and just goes and buries it. And
like
something like that.
He thought there'd be evidence of a fire, so he just
something. I mean, it's probably something completely random like that. One of the really off the wall theories that is about as far as I'll go. We are on a paranormal channel.
This definitely is.
I'm not saying it's aliens.
Well, there was
I'm not saying
cattle mutations on the Tina bar. That's true. Briefly
there
heard
were
that.
cattle mutilations there. It's true, but I'm not saying it's aliens. But it's aliens. But but the farthest I will go, Cooper actually offered Tina, the girl, the stewardess he spent all the time with. When she brings the money on the plane, she jokes with him. She goes, "Hey, there's a lot of money in that bag. Can I have some?" He hands her $6,000.
He did?
And he did. And she holds it. Now that's about $53,000 in today's money. Okay. So he hands her $6,000 and she looks at it and goes, "Oh, we can't accept gratuities on the airline, sir," and hands it back to him. Okay. So, somebody in my comments the other day, I was doing a YouTube live and somebody said, "Hey, was Tina or was Cooper ever alone with her purse?" And I'm like,
good comment. I saw that.
I was like, "Oh shit, he actually was."
Great
because
comment.
We know from talking to these stewardesses, other Northwest Airlines 727 stewardesses from the era that we've talked to a few of them, they used to store their purses in this cabinet behind the last row was a cabinet where they kept oxygen tanks. The stewardesses would hide their purses there, and in fact, Flo, the Filipino stewardess, she forgot her purse. When he let her go, he kept Tina as the main hostage. He eventually lets Flo go. Flo runs off the plane, then she goes, "Oh crap, my purse." And she runs back on the plane and she walks back to the back of the plane and says, "Sir, I forgot my purse. Can I get it?" He goes, "Sure, go ahead. I won't bite," which is a great Cooper quote. He says, "I won't bite." And so this has always been a weird thing for us. Why is this encounter so awkward with the purse? Well, now we know where they kept their purses was right behind where he was sitting, right by his butt, basically.
Yeah.
So she kind of had to squeeze behind him. That's why this encounter is so kind of awkward when you read it. But anyway, Cooper would have noticed that she got her purse from back there. So it's possible. Remember, he was back there for 30 minutes by himself. He sends Tina, they take off from Seattle. He sends Tina to the front, waves goodbye to her, says, "Hey, close the curtains. Don't come back here." 30 minutes later, he jumps out. Okay. Tina Mucklow's purse would have been in that compartment too. Perhaps Cooper was nice and said, "You know what? I'll put this in this girl's purse just because." And who knows? I mean, remember, this is 71. The FBI aren't going to frisk a stewardess coming off a hijacked plane.
No.
They're not going to look in her purse,
No.
So who knows? Maybe. And here's remember here's where it gets spooky. It's Tina Bar. The sandbar is called Tina Bar.
Tina Bar.
Her name is Tina Mucklow. So, I mean, we used to make fun of that and go, "Oh, that's a coincidence." But one of the other stewardesses was named Alice Hancock. If we found Cooper money behind Alice's restaurant, we'd be like, "That's a weird coincidence." But I don't know. And interestingly enough, Tina was from Pennsylvania, from Philly, but she was living in Minneapolis at the time of the hijacking. She moves to Portland, Oregon, the year before the money is found there. Now, again, the money had been buried for a while, they think, but that's as far. I don't like conspiracy stuff, but that's as far as I'll go. As maybe, like, whatever it is, we've spent decades trying to come up with a plausible explanation for that money. None of us, like literally no one, can come up with a logical explanation that matches all these scientific things that about the money, that it wasn't there, that it didn't get wet. How did it get wet in the springtime, not in the wintertime? How did it get buried? Yeah. Why would someone bury it there? Why is it just $6,000, not the rest of it? Why? We have no idea. So
I vote for planted. And now Ryan's coming around to that. So I vote for planted.
Well, I mean, it had to be planted. I mean,
yeah,
or thrown away.
I always thought planted.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way it was found was, the whole thing is odd. And then later, as we know, more conspiratorial is the man who packed the parachutes, Earl Cossey, was found mysteriously murdered. What year was that? Yeah, he was murdered, I think, in 2013, in his garage.
Really?
But, yeah, the thought is that he had gambling debt. He was known to carry, like, at one point he carried $50,000 in cash on him. So more than likely that was a gambling related murder, or somebody knew he carried a lot of cash on him. But when you consider all the woo woo, it's like, okay, well,
Yeah,
the guy who the
someone did mail back all the contents of his wallet. I don't think the wallet itself, but just the contents of the wallet were sent
Yeah.
back to either his daughter or his son, and
Yeah.
it was
So,
only the contents. And they didn't say who it was from, where they found it. They just anonymously sent back the contents of his wallet, which no money. I think it was just ID and credit cards, stuff like that.
So
And there's no clues in the murder.
was his skyjacking was at night, wasn't it? It was at night?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So
jumped at
he
night.
jumps out the airplane. He's in sunglasses. How the hell can he see? But another thing is, he had a lot of money on him. And maybe he took some of that money and buried it to hide it to come back to it at some other time, instead of having all this money on him at one time, like starting to let loose of some of it. I wonder if there's other locations that he may have buried some money, but it was never found.
Could have happened. We know none of the other bills have ever turned up, and all the serial numbers of the bills are online. I know Ryan knows how to get to them. So if anybody ever finds a star note, I know that's something people might collect that could have come from the lot of Cooper's bills. I think they were mostly 69 issued $20 bills, but some were called star notes that people might hold on to because, of course, a random 1969 $20 bill is going to be discarded. But the star notes are collectible, so there's maybe some chance out there that another bill outside of that lot is found one day, which would be pretty amazing.
So
It might not solve the case, but it would be incredible if it ever turned up, another bill.
the money that was given to him, was that all traceable if he spent it?
it
Yeah,
would
it
have
was
been.
cataloged.
It was. I mean, all the serial numbers were cataloged. And we have all the serial numbers. They're all. If you go to my website, I've got all 10,000 of these $20 bill serial numbers. But the problem is, money didn't last very long back then. Money back then had a shelf life. The FBI actually, we have this in the FBI files. They contact the Treasury and say, "Hey, how long is a $20 bill going to last in circulation?" This is in 1973, and they say about 18 months before they're pulled.
Wow.
Now, so money didn't last as long back then because it was used. Cash was used more back then,
Yeah.
right? But the NCIC, or the Treasury, did not start cataloging the serial numbers of destroyed money because they, when they pull money out of circulation, destroy it. Now they catalog the serial numbers. They didn't start doing that until 1990. So all those 20s, or the majority of them, could have been spent and then destroyed over time because they're just pulled from circulation, and we would never know. But again, Cooper could have gone to Vietnam or France or somewhere. Dollars spend everywhere.
Yeah.
So
Laundered it
Yeah.
somehow.
that's
no,
true.
the FBI agents I talked to, they put no stock in the fact that the money wasn't spent. There's no way of knowing that,
Yeah.
really.
Before computers and everything we have now.
Renee wants to know, between both of you, who do you think the suspect is?
I still like Ted Braden. I'm a Braden guy, but I still like the early days before I had a suspect because I'm just such a fan of the case. So part of me, somebody asked that question online the other day. Would you like to see it solved now, or would you like to see all the details or whatever? And I think I said something like, I kind of like the idea of an unsolved mystery because he gets to stay a legend forever.
Yeah.
So I like that. But I'm still a Braden guy, still a Braden champion. And I'm glad that Ryan's always coming up with new suspects, and I like hearing about him. He'll send me new suspects, even though I have one, but I still love learning about him because, like he says, I can't put my guy on the plane. Nobody can. If we could do that, we wouldn't be talking about it or having Cooper conventions. If we could put any of these guys on the plane, well, it's over. But I think life would go on. If it was solved, it would be something kind of like the Forrest Fenn community. When the Forrest Fenn treasure was found, they're kind of still together. Some of them came over to the Cooper camp, but I think we'd be a little bit like the Finsters after the Fenn treasure got found. So I think life would go on.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a suspect really. I mean, there are several guys that I've liked. I would not be at all surprised if it was Ted Braden. I guess that's the way that I look at it, is like, would I be surprised if this person was Cooper? And, or who would I not be surprised, I guess. And there's a few suspects who I would not be if it came out that it was them. But the honest truth is that millions of people could have been Cooper. You know, and we just, you know, when the numbers are that great, I'm going to take in gambling, they say, are you going to take the field? They call it. I mean, I'd put my bet on the field, meaning we don't know his name yet. Probably, but Drew's got easily, certainly one of the best suspects without question, for sure. If he wasn't, I often like to joke with Drew that the best argument for Ted Braden being DB Cooper is that he would have been a copycat if he wasn't DB Cooper. He would have done
hearing about it, not trying it.
Right, because that's exactly the kind of crime he would easily be able to do. I mean, in fact, of all the people on planet Earth, none maybe alive at the time were better suited to pull this off than Ted Braden. I mean, this guy literally jumped into the jungles of Vietnam at night in the jungle. So jumping into the suburbs of Portland at night would be nothing for him.
Walk in the park.
Yeah, just another day. You know, it would have been fun actually for him. Right up his alley. He's one of the best skydivers on the planet at the time. So, and he was a criminal. So,
felon, yeah, top skydiver.
He was a bad dude.
Had it.
Real bad guy. So I don't know, but I would still say we don't know his name yet. If I had a gun to my head, for sure.
But he does believe he survived. We all do. I think that's pretty heavy. So
I'm not 100% on that, but I mean, there's no reason to think he died. I mean, none. I mean, there's just no reason. In fact, I would say the best evidence he lived is the money found at Tina Bar, because just say that, I mean, again, the plane is never within 10 miles of where that money's found. Let's just say that something happens with his parachute and he plummets to the ground and crashes into the earth somewhere. To explain the money being there, you have to concoct some really crazy scenario where somebody finds his body and
leaves it behind,
takes the money, or, because right. I mean, if he
that's a good point.
Plummets to the ground and dies, the money's going to be still with him. Probably. So I think the money found at Tina Bar is the best evidence he lived, because how does it get there if he
died? Yeah. If he dies into the ground.
Yeah. If he just crashed into the earth somewhere and is never found again, then that money's not going to grow legs and walk 10 miles.
Right.
Yeah. So he either got away and somehow the money got there, or someone found his dead body and never told anybody and pocketed the money and then went and buried it somewhere. Like, that's highly unlikely. So I think it's good evidence that he lived.
Wow. Boy, this was really interesting tonight, because I found out a lot of stuff I didn't know before. Holy
I did
cow.
too. I know it pretty well. Every time I hear Ryan talk, I learned something I didn't know before. I'm like,
I talk too much, but it's fun.
I know, it was great.
I love learning more. I love learning more about Cooper.
Well, that was a really fun show.
And the beautiful thing is, the FBI have about 85,000 documents that they've been forced to release.
Still rolling.
They've only released about 45,000 of them. They're going to be releasing these every month until 2031 or something. So, every month we still get new information, not as much as we used to. The information, the files coming out now aren't as good as they used to be, but we still get some really interesting nuggets every month. I mean, there's always learn something new every month. So it's always evolving. Yeah. In fact, maybe Bill Mitchell's side profile sketch is going to be in one of these.
But you didn't know anything about it. I remember you were so excited when you heard about it at the conference. You were like,
couldn't believe it.
Okay, you were so excited. It was great. But if you want to see a great video of Ryan taking apart the parachute piece by piece, go to his channel, DB Cooper Sleuth. And
you're DB Cooper Sleuth? Oh my God, I've been watching your videos.
Sleuth right there.
I've been watching your videos.
That's the best video.
Where
he goes piece by piece. That's the big one. It's got 50,000 views now, but Ryan goes piece by piece of why this is not the right parachute.
I
Yeah,
know.
just YouTube DB Cooper parachute. I'm sure I'll probably pop up. It's probably the top. It just says busted on the video. Busted for Dan
I
Gryder.
know.
Yes, it
I
says
saw
busted.
it.
Yeah, and
Ah.
hopefully, like I said, hopefully the media picks it up soon. I think they are. And like I said, watch when the media picks it up, and if the FBI comes out and says something, watch for Dan Gryder to pivot to say, oh, well, they don't want it solved because they think Cooper died and they don't want to be proven wrong. That's exactly what he's
That
going to say.
sounds like
Because
I agree with you. That's what's going to happen.
watch. I'm almost tempted to make a video, a pre-reaction
That
to
would be
what's
funny.
coming.
That's a great
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
Maybe I
think
should
you
do that.
Yeah,
I know
you
he's going to say
should.
short. At least a YouTube short.
Yeah, that sounds
yeah.
good.
Thank you. I'm going to do that tomorrow, Drew. Actually, going to say this is
That
what he's
would
gonna
be
say.
funny. The pre-crime.
Yeah, like
YouTube
like
short.
Minority Report. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I love it.
Hey guys, thanks so much for coming on. Hey, I have to be honest with you. When I posted that on Facebook, I did that on purpose.
What the thing about the parachute?
Yeah, I
line?
said, "Oh yeah, no,
Oh, you were
yeah."
no, you didn't. You drive me crazy because I was like, no, Norene, what are you doing?
I was waiting. I saw that on CNN. I said, "Oh
You
God."
need to watch Ryan's video, and I think I might have put a link to Ryan's video in there.
I was waiting for a reaction. I love it.
Oh
See,
man,
and
I heard from. I mean, Ryan,
know,
I'm sure
Mike
heard from two things
Davis.
I did. Oh God, I got so many emails.
Look, I heard.
Hey, did you know
Norene,
they found the parachute?
I heard.
Are you into
like,
this
yeah,
guy?
everybody's texting us about. Oh, did you hear about it? You know who texted me about it? Bill Mitchell, the college kid who sat next to Cooper, texted me and said, "Hey man," he goes, "Hey Ryan," because we text each other. He's like, "Hey Ryan,
guy just sat by Cooper.
what about this parachute?" So yeah, the actual guy who sat next to Cooper is messaging me going, "Hey, what's this about?"
That's
So,
surreal.
I think, yeah, that is surreal when that happens. That was fun.
Oh, that was good. See, now I got you on the show.
Yes, I'm glad.
Ryan
Anytime there's
knows his
Cooper.
stuff.
The next time some grifter comes along, you can have me on to
Ryan knows his
debunk
stuff.
the guy.
Okay, I'll have you both on. Thanks so much. It was really fun. I really enjoyed the show with you two. I really appreciate that.
So fun.
Yes, of course.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hey, Merry Christmas to you both. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Merry
Bye,
Christmas.
folks.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks. Thanks, Norene.
Oh yeah, I'll be talking with you, Drew. Okay, I'll be
Okay.
talking with you for about another show. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah,
Good night.
definitely.
Yeah.
Enjoyed
good
it.
night. Thank you. I did. Oh my God, that was so much fun. I hope you enjoyed it. Okay. Not gonna. Okay. So guys, thanks so much for joining me. This was a long show tonight. But I had fun with them. I knew I was going to get a reaction from them when I put it on Facebook. I just knew it. Anyway, thanks so much, everybody. I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'll have I'm not going to have another show because I've got like 30 people coming for Christmas, and I'm just going crazy here. I'm still trying to put stuff away from all my autumn stuff for Thanksgiving that I had put out, wrapping everything up and packing it. And so I will have some shows in January, and I do have Professor Fold, who is writing a book on AI. I know some of you probably aren't interested in it, but he talks about the paranormal with this AI, and he's part of Mensa. He's extremely intelligent, and I've known him for years, and so I invited him to come on the show in February. His book, I don't know when his book is. I think his book must be coming out because he sent me the cover of it. So, but I have some other shows scheduled, and gonna start another year with getting shows together. I hope I can get some good ones for you. I love you guys, and I appreciate you being here. We had, I think at one point we had like 51 in watching. If you guys would, if you enjoyed the show and you're not subscribed to my channel, if you would please subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. And please Give the show a like if you enjoyed it. I would appreciate that as well. It helps out my channel. So everybody, I'm gonna go. I love you guys. It's been shoot. It's a 2.5 hour show. It's longer than what I thought. I'll do some shout outs. There's not much left in the chat room now. I want to say thank you so much to Renee and Chipeteri, my mods. I love you guys so much, and thank you always for being here. Um, I really, really appreciate that. I know you have families too, and then to take the time away from your family to mod my show, it's much appreciated. I think Chipeteri had to go early. So let me do some shout outs. Renee, of course, Lori Miller, Tallcross, my buddy from Scotland. I'm so sorry. It's so early in the morning now for you. I'm so sorry. It was such a long show, but I enjoyed that. I just love Drew, and I really enjoyed meeting Ryan. Barry J, B83 Airspace, Paul Fam G Team. Let's see who is, I don't know, left in the chat room. Anybody else? Anybody else want a shout out before I? Oh, thank you, Renee. That was I can't tell you how much I enjoyed that. That was fun. Okay, I'm gonna go now. So guys, I love you. Big hug. Be safe out there. It's been so cold here in California. It's just, oh, I'm freezing. So I'm gonna go and like I said, be safe, happy holidays, and I will see you in January, okay? Thank you so much. I love you guys. Good night. Thank you.